Coming up, Mitch from the Video Vacuum is going to be on, and we'll be talking about True Justice Deadly Crossing, the Steven Seagal 2-episode movie that we caught on Tubi. So we'll be chatting about that in just a little bit. Next week, we'll be continuing a look at the Blood Fist series. I think I'll be solo again for that one. I will be doing number 5 and 6 for those. And then in 2 weeks, hoping to have Ty from Comeuppance back on as we look at 2 films. We're going to finish off the Detective Night series with Bruce Willis. And then also we're going to look at a new Bruce Dern film. We're going to be looking at Hellblazers, I believe it's called. So it's funny, I should probably know the names of them right before I watch them. But that's what we'll be looking to do. Also, I'm looking to get Brett from Comeuppance back on in the near future again. So hopefully Ty and Brett will come on. We might be doing another list episode, which we haven't done one of those in a while. But the last one we did was Unsung Dudikoff, and it was a really popular episode. So that's probably where we're going to be going next. And then we've got some guests lined up for December. In the offing there. Hopefully we'll kind of see. But I don't want to blow up anybody's spot or mention any episodes yet until we get those recorded and in the can. But that's what we got going up in the coming weeks. So next week, more Blood Fist. Then 2 weeks after that, Ty from Comeuppance back on, and we look at a couple movies there. In terms of the site, we just did Chinatown Connection, which got Art Camacho into the 50 Club, right? That puts him third all-time in the 50 Club after Dolph, who has 70 films. I don't have a 60 or 70 club, but that's, those would be Dolph's to himself. And then Gary Daniels has 58 movies, so he's a couple away from the 60 club, which again, I don't have a 60 club, that's where he is. But then Art Camacho just entered the 50 club with Chinatown Connection, which that was a more popular post than I was expecting. A lot of people were really excited to see me review that one there. So again, and shout out to Ty from Comeuppance for suggesting we do that one for Camacho's 50th post. It was a really fun movie. It's on YouTube. I definitely suggest people check it out. It's got Bruce Lee. I don't know. It's Bruce L.Y., but one of the Bruce Lee clones, right? And then Lee Majors II, Lee Majors' son, is in it as well. So, really, really interesting. Somebody actually asked if it was a Bruce-ploitation, but it isn't. As far as I could tell, Bruce Lee, or Bruce Lee, however you want to say it, I think Bruce Lee, he came to the U.S. and tried to make a couple movies. So he made this one, and he made one with David Carradine, which I can't think of the name of right now. But that's, he made 2 movies in like 89, 90, and then that was it. He went back to Hong Kong and continue with his career there. So it's not a Bruce-ploitation film. It's your standard DTV actioner from 89, but from 1990. But definitely worth checking out for people. Then in terms of posts coming up after that, I just watched New Barbarians, an Italian exploitation film with Fred the Hammer Williamson. So excited to get some more Fred Williamson up there. It was an interesting movie. It was a fun one, but it's one of those post-apocalyptic Italian ones. Enzo Castellari directed it. So that review will be coming this weekend. I think in 2 weeks we'll have The Get Back. That with Theo Rossi, which is one that Ty and I did on a previous episode of the podcast. Then Astro, Gary Daniels' movie that I've been meaning to review for a long time. We'll finally get that. That'll be his 59th film on the site. And then Christmas. In the past for Christmas, I've done a documentary. Sort of like as a kind of a unique thing. And I'm going to do the documentary, the Randall Scandal documentary. So I've seen that one on Hulu. Really interesting, especially with Ty and I doing a lot of these Bruce Willis, EFO films, to watch this documentary on Randall and get a sense of who he was. So I'll be talking about that. I'll be reviewing that one for the site. In terms of other news, I have a website for my novels now, or sort of an author website for me. So it's a little separate from the DTV Connoisseur website. It is Matthew Poirier Author, all one word, MatthewPoirierAuthor.com. And you can go there for all of my books. I'm going to start a blog on writing there as well, all of that. So I don't know to what extent I'm going to start pulling things away between the author, my novels and things like that, and having it separate from the site, from the blog and the podcast. Of course, I'll be kind of cross-posting in terms of getting the word out for both things. So if I've got a podcast episode or something like that, I've got the podcast and the blog linked on the website. So I'll look to try to kind of do both. But I've been looking to try to maybe when it comes to things like Goodreads and those kinds of things, they kind of want a separate page for your writing. And so in the past, I kind of kept the two together. mostly because I developed a pretty solid audience here at the direct-to-video connoisseur, which again, I appreciate all of you that read the site or read the reviews, that engage on social media, and of course that listen to this podcast here. But I was looking to kind of use kind of work with that audience, kind of marry the two, right? Have my direct-to-video connoisseur audience and sell my books through that audience, but it hasn't quite worked out that way, and now it's sort of like a thing where, like, especially my Twitter page and not so much my Facebook, but definitely the Twitter page. It's kind of a mix, right, of authors trying to get the word out about their books and me retweeting those, and then movie sites and me retweeting those and engaging with those. And then of course I do my own stuff with sports things, right? So that's something that's going to be coming probably in the future. I don't know, especially with what's happening with Twitter/X, like if I want to bother putting creating a whole new Twitter for my author stuff, trying to build that up when we don't know what's going to happen with Twitter in the near future. I may just kind of stick with the status quo for now. I think with Facebook at some point I probably will have a separate author page for my Facebook, and then the other one is Blue Sky. I've started on Blue Sky. So I don't have a DTV connoisseur on Blue Sky yet, but I do have one for myself that's for my writing and things like that. I think if I'm on there long enough, I can get invite codes, and I might then be able to create a separate one for direct-to-video connoisseur. I don't know how that works. But yeah, so I've been kind of starting on there. It's still very, very small. I mean, I only have a few followers. There's some friends, and I'm following some people. I'm trying to think what my Blue Sky account is, if you want to look me up on there. I think it's like Matt Poirier Blue Sky or something like that. It's Matt Poirier .bsky, is what they say, .bsky.social. So if you want to look me up on there, I'm happy to follow anybody on Blue Sky as well. But yeah, we'll see what happens there with that one, and again with my writing and all of that. But that is something to keep an eye out for. Is that I have just created a website for my writing, for my novels, that kind of thing, and I'll probably start to kind of pull some things away from the website and put them there more that have to do strictly with my writing, but still kind of keep getting the word out about that. And of course, my newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. If you'd like to pick that up, $5 on Kindle, which isn't bad. I looked here in Philadelphia, and getting a caramel brulee latte at Starbucks is like $5 something, so it's cheaper than one of those holiday lattes, grande size. And I can make this promise that I don't have enough money to hire staff now, but if I ever get the money to hire staff, I will allow them to unionize. I won't fight them with unionizing. So if you give me your money as opposed to Starbucks, I'm not going to use it for union busting. So I can make that promise right now. So just to give you that sense. But yeah, you can pick up those novels. All of my novels are on Amazon. Don's House in the Mountains is probably the easiest one. If you just type in Don's House in the Mountains, it will pop up. Holtman Arms is there, Girl and a Gun, and of course Chad in Accounting. All of them have new cover designs. So I've went through Canva and created new covers. So if you remember before, they were just the title and my name with a blank one color. Now they're all new designs there, so you can go check those out as well. All right, so what we'll do here is we'll listen to John Cross of After Movie Diner, Miscellaneous Clothing Fixtures, and the Be Kind Rewind store in New Milford, Connecticut. So if you ever go there, he's got a VHS store in Connecticut now that you can check out as well. But we're going to have him do our theme song for us here, and then when we come back, Mitch from the Video Vacuum Beyond will be talking a little Steven Seagal. And and also I be remiss if I forgot. We're not going to be just talking about Steven Seagal, but we're also going to talk about Elves. It's that time of year already, right? Can you believe it? We're close to Christmas time, and so every year we have Mitch on, and we always talk about his favorite and what's slowly becoming one of my favorite holiday films, Elves. The Dan Haggerty, AIP, Nazi experiment classic, Elves. So we'll be talking about that, and we'll be talking about Little Seagal. So do some theme song, and we'll be back in just a bit.
All right, we are back, and we are joined once again by Mitch Lovell from the Video Vacuum. Welcome back, Mitch.
Thanks for having me again, Matt.
All right, excellent. I was going to say, I realized I think it's been since June since you were last on when we were talking about Wave Productions.
Yeah, that was the years going by really fast. It seems like it didn't seem like that long ago, but yeah, absolutely, it's been a while.
Yeah, and so now that we're kind of we're already into November, so I figured, how are things going with the Tubi Continued project?
Oh, Tubi Continued's doing pretty well. It's for those who don't know, I'm trying to watch 365 movies on Tubi in 365 days. I'm a little behind. I'm about 10 movies behind, but right now I'm going through a massacre phase, watching any horror movie that has the word massacre in it, and it's been kind of rough in some places, but every now and then you get something like a babysitter massacre that kind of just reinvigorates you and forces you to keep going.
Yeah, I think we joked about this when you were on the last time, that when you did Amityville April, that you literally could do 30 Amityville movies just from Tubi for the month of April if you wanted to. Now I know you didn't go that extreme, but there are that many Amityville movies on Tubi.
Well, I mean, for this movie watching project, I'm kind of trying to steer away from movies that I've already seen. I want them to all to kind of be new to me movies. So I didn't do any of the official Amityville 1, 2, and 3. But if you can, consider the tried and true Amityville originals in with the whole fake Amityville movies that I watch, you can definitely do even a 31 day month of nothing but Amityville movies.
Yeah, there's a few that I noticed like that. One of them was Michael Madsen. I was like, oh, could you do like a Madsen May or a Madsen March or something like that? And you can. I want to say there's like 40 or 50 Madsen movies on Tubi. There might even be more than that. It's been a while since I counted them.
Well, he actually turned up in one of the massacre movies I was watching called Burial Ground Massacre, where I mean, spoiler alert, but he is the Native American killer in the Native Native American mask. And it's funny because we all know what Michael Madsen looks like. The for like the first 90 minutes of the movie, the killer is this like tall, skinny guy in a mask, and then at the end when there's the big reveal, and Michael Madsen, his husky self, is in the same getup, and I mean, it almost made the whole movie worthwhile just for that, big reveal scene. But yeah, it was pretty dire other than that.
It's kind of like with Scooby-Doo, right? Where you'd have like this monster that was like doing all these supernatural things and all this kind of crazy stuff, and it would be like larger than life or something. And then when they pull the mask off, it'd be like the dorky like usher at the theater that they the haunted theater. And it was like, how is this guy doing all of this crazy stuff, right? That it's just once the mask is real, suddenly it's the dorky guy and that's it.
Yeah, I think even the movie kind of made a reference to Scooby-Doo, like, when they're splitting up to kind of find the killer. But it was one of those movies where it just so many missed opportunities, like the house that the guy lived in had a bowling alley, and like you're just waiting for a head to come in through the ball return, and they never do that. Yeah, and I'm like, it's just like, you had the bowling alley, you gotta commit to the bit.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think with these, especially with the more modern, lower budget movies, is they kind of are just sort of thrown out there. And I almost think too, like it's almost like they made the movie without realizing that they were going to be shooting at at a place that had a bowling alley. And it's always like, well, we're here, we're making the movie now, we're just going to follow the script, instead of being like, hey, wait a second, we got this bowling alley place. Let's, somebody get me a prosthetic head or something like that. I think you'd be okay if it was like a Recessa Annie doll, right? That just was painted red and it just rolled down,
Yeah, just something with a blonde wig or something on, something, a cantaloupe, anything.
Yeah, that's the thing I think with these Tubi movies, is that some of them, yes, you're kind of you're looking for something a little bit better. But if you're looking for like, if you see something that's like 80 minutes long and it feels kind of slapped together, you're kind of just looking for those little bits of just memorable, entertaining moments. That it doesn't take much with a movie like that to make it fun.
Well, I mean, there were movies where I was genuinely surprised. Like Babysitter Massacre was like the perfect kind of throwback to the 80s sorority house massacre, slumber party massacre type of movies. It knew the movie that it wanted to be, but a lot of these massacre movies I've been watching, even just by looking on IMDb, they'll have a totally different title, and they just changed the title afterwards, but slap the word massacre in there just to get people to watch it. Like there was a rave party massacre, and there was a rave party and there was a massacre, but there was no rave party massacre. The massacre did not occur at the rave party. So I was like, they probably just slapped something on there that sounded good, and I was gullible enough to watch it.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm looking at Babysitter Massacre now, and it is like it's one of those things where like it's got the cover that is just like like okay, this looks like it's going to be really, I don't say rough is the right thing, but if yeah, if rough is the right word, but like this is going to be really really intense. But when you look at the images for it, you're absolutely correct that like the cover sells this sort of like modern torture porn kind of thing. But then when you go
Right.
into the IMDb page and you start looking at the images, it has that 80s like slumber party massacre kind of feel with the women, kind of in various stages of undress, in like various situations of distress, while doing Ouija board and stuff like that. And it definitely kind of has that feel to it for sure.
And I'm on board with blending humor and horror and stuff. And then there's some like sometimes it's more hit and miss. Like I watched the Spanish Chainsaw Massacre, and it was in Spanish, and there was a chainsaw, but again, it was more like 2000 Maniacs,
Right.
the Spanish 2000 Maniacs kind of. But they had in that one there was more like a trauma kind of vibe, where kind of anything goes,
Yeah.
politically incorrect kind of thing, and you know yeah, I'm always down for that. But some of these movies, I think, they trade on that massacre title, and either they'll give you a massacre, or they kind of go overboard with the massacre. So that's why I like Babysitter Massacre. Scissors Massacre was pretty good too, even though that was more of a Japanese J-horror folk story kind of thing, folk horror legend. Uh, but it still had scissors, and there was still a massacre, so we were all good there.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, we've had screenwriter Tom Jolliffe on, who he writes some of these movies that end up on Tubi. Sort of. I'm trying to think of some of the ones that he's done. I know, like he's like there was a Van Helsing movie. A Jurassic movie. I should take a look at his here it is. So look at his IMDb bio to see, because what he said is like he puts together the script and then he sends it off. And I don't know exactly how it works. Like if he sends it to like to the distributors, or he sends it, they make the movie. But he said like what happens is that then the distributors start to mess with it to get it the way that they want it, and like he'll say like like maybe he designs the movie to have two couples, right? So it's like two couples going into a haunted area, and they encounter a bunch of stuff, and then the people making it are like, no, we need four women, right? Because we just want to see four women in trouble or something like that. So it's like that's the change that happens. But I think he talked about I was going to say he had an Amityville movie himself, but he said like movies that like they shoot in England, so they even have like sort of actors and actresses in England, and they shoot the whole thing in England, but the distributors want it to be American, and so they'll slap a title like Amityville or something like that, or have it be in America somehow. And you can tell that the locations are in England, right? It's so obvious. But the actors are affecting American accents and all that stuff, which is interesting because I think, especially like in your situation, right, where you're watching a lot of these, that if they mixed it up and had one based in England, it would probably be more of like a novelty for you.
Well, there was a Redwood Massacre, which took place in England with the English cast, and it was a fairly effective slasher. And the sequel, on the other hand, had same production company, same writer, producer, director, but it was all Americans this time. It even had like Danielle Harris.
Right.
And instead of the woods, they were in like an underground bunker. It was like I don't know if it was a case of they're trading on the title, maybe, or if they were just kind of like doubling down and trying to make everything kind of bigger and kind of more exploitative or whatever. But it didn't quite work because like that was kind of the appeal of, it was like a kind of 80s backwoods slasher kind of movie, whereas this one was almost like a mind ripper kind of thing, like, in this underground lab with, people trapped under there. So it was a very strange kind of, jumping off point for a sequel.
Yeah, it's interesting, even with that kind of that piece of it, it seems like, for action movies, of course, we're used to this a lot, right? Where you throw some names in there and hopefully it gives the movie credibility. But like Danielle Harris is one from a horror standpoint, right? That it's like, oh, if you can get Danielle Harris, and I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of some others like Linnea Quigley, there's Barbara Crampton, that like if you get them in the horror movie, suddenly you feel like you can sell it to like real horror fans, real, and it's like when you're looking through all these Tubi titles and you see Danielle Harris, like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Danielle Harris's. But it's like, if the movie doesn't have enough beyond that, it's like that's enough to get the stream out of you, I guess, and that's probably what's most important. But it is one of those things where you're like, I the name is great, but it would be nice if I just had a good movie.
I mean, and that's what I've discovered, from 300 odd days watching Tubi, where, like, those first three names, like it'll be like a Felissa Rose or, somebody like that, and you're like, okay, and then you watch it, and then it's obvious that she was only there for a day, to shoot like a cameo or whatever, and the rest is just, these guys that just had a video camera and like, $50,000 or whatever. So I mean, yeah, but my philosophy with the video vacuum has always been quantity over quality. I'm in all of actors, directors that have this like enormous body of work in like a little amount of time. So I'm always, when I'm watching these Tubi movies, a lot of the same names are coming up, like Dustin Ferguson.
Oh yes,
Who,
yeah.
I mean, I'll probably crunch the numbers when I'm at the end, but I mean, he's got to be the most watched director of this project. I mean, easily over. You could do a December Dustin December and watch all of his movies that are on there.
Yeah, because he was the one. I don't know exactly if it was. I don't say like officially that like Albert Pyun had tapped him to sort of like take over some of his projects, but Dustin Ferguson was the one who directed the fifth Nemesis movie, and it would have been interesting to see if like some of these projects that Pyun wasn't able to finish, like the cyborg ones and the kickboxer ones, if like Dustin Ferguson could get those and like kind of complete them for us so we have them. But yeah, it is interesting that like I think what was I going to say? I think Pyun liked him just because, like you talked about, that sort of that quantity effect, but also like the independent spirit effect that he has. I don't. He's done some movies with Mel Novak that one I think it's a producer or agent who works with Novak will come to me and say like, "Hey, can you review this movie or that movie?" And so I've seen Ferguson. He's definitely, like you said, he's definitely a quantity guy. Kind of in the mold of like a Fred Olen Ray or a Jim Wynorski.
Yeah, and I just saw that he completed a remake of Spider Baby, which I'm kind of curiously optimistic about. So I think it's kind of goes along with his sensibilities, but also goes back to like that low budget kind of wheelhouse that I think he's very good at. A lot of his movies are knowingly throwbacks anyway to like the Grindhouse era. They'll have like the scratch print and the missing reels and stuff. So I mean, or he'll tack on like a Elvira type opening with like a horror hostess. Mostly it's there to just pad out the running time. But yeah, he's very keenly aware of like horror history and stuff. And even if the movie's not that great, I always do like seeing those little flourishes that he brings to the movies.
Yeah, sometimes that's enough. It's interesting. I know I was watching one of Fred Olen Ray's Christmas movies with my wife. It was oh man, I can't remember. It had Michelle Trachtenberg in it and Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, and I can't remember the name of it. It was like Christmas in Palm Springs or something like that. But I'm watching it with her, and I'm seeing these little flourishes that Fred Olen Ray added to the movie. Like he'd have a character that looked very much like Dennis the Menace, or that kind of a like 60s kid, like with the haircut and stuff. And it's funny because my wife's watching, like, why did he make that kid look like he's from the 60s? Like, what's going on there? And I'm like, that's Fred Olen Ray. It kind of just sort of adding his own touches to make those movies, and it makes those Christmas movies like something unique. I think him and David Dakota do a lot of them. It would be interesting to think if Dustin Ferguson, if he ever gets like on that level. I mean, he's doing enough with these, but if Hallmark ever taps him to do Christmas movies, what those end up looking like?
Yeah, I mean, he could do like 12 Days of Christmas on a $12 budget.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that's all those Christmas movies are, is they're just essentially these low budget horror films that we like, or that they're just kind of pumped out there really quickly. And or like we did Santa Summer House with David Dakota film. They kind of it's the same idea, right? And so it's like, well, if Hallmark needs I don't know how many movies that they do for Christmas nowadays, but they usually need quite a few. These directors who have been used to doing it quick and under budget for a long time, they're like the perfect ones to bring in. And I think for these guys, like you said, with the quantity over quality approach, with the quantity, being the number one thing, it's like, hey, just give me the script and give me the actors and give me a week in a mansion, and I'll take care of it for you.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too. I've seen ads now for there've been horror conventions, for decades. I saw an ad the other day for a Christmas movie convention, and it was, I think, in Edison, New Jersey, and it has like all the people from, I think the headliners like Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo for Christmas Vacation, but it's like I think like Danica McKellar, like they're like all these like names that are like you always see in these Hallmark movies, and they're gonna be there, signing autographs and stuff. And it's kind of weird, like you said, there is like kind of like somewhere in the Venn diagram, there is like the Christmas movies and the horror movies kind of intersect.
Yeah. I see this, like, Christmas. Oh, there's like you're right, Edison, New Jersey, Christmas Con 2023. That's just like absolutely amazing. It's gonna be December 8th through the 10th. Like, that just seems like it could be a ton of fun. Like, it's like you said, it's like there's that like you said, the Venn diagram, that kind of that combination of these things. And it's also interesting from an actress standpoint, where I always joked it was like the island of the misfit toys, right? It's the island of the misfit that actors, like, that once their career dips to a certain level, they're doing these films. But like, it is, some of them have kind of carved out like a niche for themselves, like Lacey Chabert from from Party of Five and Mean Girls. She's in tons of these movies, and it's just like, oh, she was living in Vermont, and now she's became a famous fashion designer. Now she's moved back home for a bit, and here's the rugged, square lantern jawed, Canadian actor who's grew up in her hometown with her, who's like showing up on the doorstep with a litter of kittens, and suddenly they fall in love. And it's like, I'm sure for her, she could probably sleepwalk her way through these by now, but it is like kind of like interesting that some of these actors have, it's almost like, Santa coming by at the end of Rudolph and picking them all up and delivering to the kids at the end there.
Yeah, and I think too, there's a kind of assembly line kind of mentality too. Like, when they're making the movie in July, because it's got to be ready for their 23 days of Christmas marathon, and then in December they're making them because they need them for the Christmas in July marathon. So I think there's it's supply and demand, and like you said, like the guys that can crank these out, they're gonna they're always going to be the one to get the phone call, and the actresses and actors who are willing to throw on a scarf and get into fake snowball fights week after week. It's for a lot of them, it's a paycheck, and they're working, they're I'm sure it beats unemployment. So.
Right. Well, exactly. Well, because like, yeah, we've learned with SAG, with the SAG strike, that like, we think actors like, you think like Brandon Ruth is a great example. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. The one who was in the Superman movie, I guess the fifth Superman movie. I guess it was, before they got Henry Cavill to do them. And he was in one that I was watching with my wife, where it was like he was like a fireman, and it had like Gregory Harrison, who was like the older fireman who's retiring, and maybe he was going to get the job as the fire chief. But anyway, his ex lover was living in Florida as a vet, and then she comes back to where their town is in Oregon, and they kind of like, of course, they rekindle their romance with cats. I think there was like a litter of kittens that gets dropped off at the firehouse, and they have to, distribute them or something. But it's like you're watching Brandon Ruth, who was Superman at one time. And he still kind of has that Superman quality to him, like when he's on screen with everybody else who's in this movie. But it's like, you find out with the SAG thing that, like, just because you were in Superman once doesn't mean that you're infinitely wealthy and just, you can live off of that the rest of your life. That, like, these movies don't pay out exactly the way we think, unless you're at like the highest level. And even like having your own TV show, if you're not like the name above the credits, like, you're just limited to being like a guest star, and you get paid like whatever money. So it's like, yeah, these movies come in and they're paychecks, and from the film standpoint, it's like, oh, we can say we've got Brandon Routh, former Superman, in here. We can even make jokes about him being Superman in the movie, and yeah, it kind of helps to get eyes to the picture.
And there's also a couple starring Bruce Campbell, of all people. There's one where him and Peter Gallagher were like a Simon and Garfunkel folk duo that broke up, and then they're going to reunite for Christmas. I haven't seen it yet, but it's like when you see like Bruce Campbell in a Hallmark movie, like I said, they're kind of like drinking from the same well, the horror and the Christmas crowd.
That sounds amazing. The idea of that is just, I mean, yeah, because that's the thing with Bruce Campbell, is that, like, he kind of he kind of stumbled into acting, I think, right? Because he's doing the Evil Dead films with Sam Raimi, and it was like, oh, I can actually do this as a career, perhaps, and he kind of fell into it and get all kinds of roles. And I don't know if you've ever read his memoir, If Chins Could Kill.
Oh yeah, I've read that one. It's been ages, but yeah.
Right, yeah. So it's like, it's kind of funny hearing his story about how he becomes an actor and all of that. But that just sounds absolutely amazing. The idea of him being, is it One December Night? Does that sound right? Because it shows a band here. Two music managers put their history aside to oversee the televised reunion of their rock stuff. Oh, I see. Oh, so this is how the relationship formed. This is absolutely amazing, that it's their kids who bring them together, and then they fall in love, I guess, right? The daughter, I guess Peter Gallagher's daughter, and Bruce Campbell's son, they fall in love. This looks absolutely amazing. It's not available to stream unless you have Hallmark Movies Now on Prime Video. So it's I guess this time of year, I wonder if this time of year they sort of vault all of those from streaming, all the newer ones. Maybe they vault them for streaming, and they just, so that you have to watch them on Hallmark.
Probably, it's probably one of those things that you'll be able to watch it for free, March 1st or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Christmas in March, right?
Thing,
Yes, yeah, exactly. And one of the things is, usually I have you on for a Christmas episode, and it's interesting because this time of year is technically Christmas season in America. I think it used to be after Thanksgiving, right? You'd have until Thanksgiving. I remember when my brother was born in 1988. I remember his early birthdays in early December, because he was born December 9th. Those early birthdays even weren't quite Christmas yet. Like, it was kind of getting there. But now it's like, we have Black Friday deals in October. So it is still kind of the Christmas season here. So, because I was thinking that the last couple of years, I think I had you on for a Christmas movie.
Yeah, and we did Santa's Summer House, and then I always have, like, I always beat my drum for Elves,
right, exactly.
Movie where Dan Haggerty, Grizzly Adams himself, fights the Nazi killer elf on Christmas, and who's going to bring about the end of the world and the Antichrist. And it's just an amazing movie, really.
Yeah,
if you if I get one person to watch Elves every Christmas. That's my Christmas miracle. So.
Yeah, well, exactly. I was going to bring it up at the end of the episode, but since we've already started talking about Christmas movies, I figured now is probably the time to mention it because it is like this might be the time that you're on before Christmas. And so because I didn't schedule it out as well as possible, but I think Elves. I think this is time to sort of have that annual time where we discuss Elves on here because for me, it's like it's not one that I like. I don't think my wife could handle Elves because of the scene where the cat gets killed in it. Even though I get the reason why you have to have the cat killed because that's how the elf brings the cat, right? He gets his revenge and for her because of that. But overall, Elves. I think for people out there looking for a Christmas movie, Elves is the one that you should be watching this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where give you some background. We rented it. I think it was like maybe 91 from the video store. It was December 23rd, and then we were dying laughing. I mean, we were on the floor cracking up, but it was like one of the back in the day, it was one of those movies where, okay, like Christmas is coming up, we gotta start renting some Christmas movies, and we would always save Elves for last, and that was always on December 23rd. And then one year, my brother rented it. He was going to bring it home, and like the lady looked at it, she's like, your account's the only account that's rented this movie. It's always the same year or the same time every year. And she's like, do you just want to buy it? So that was like my Christmas gift that one year. So and every year since, we've always watched it. We get as many friends together because especially if people have seen it, many times like I have, it almost becomes like a MST kind of thing where you're just bouncing jokes off of it because it's so ripe for, just kind of, if MST does do another Christmas episode, I mean, it would be perfect if they did Elves.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think of those like ridiculous Christmas movies, right? Like like Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, and or even just the one that is Santa Claus, where they sing that Santa Claus song or whatever. This is definitely in that category of Christmas movie for sure. So with that, I think you're right. Like it's definitely it gets better with repeated viewings, just because I think for me it's the Dan Haggerty element of it that on repeated viewings just gets better and better every time I see it. Just this sort of like, I don't know how to describe it, like this sort of down on his luck, right? Because he gets like fired from the police force, I think it is, and they hire him as like security, but then they're also like, we need a Santa. Can you be the Santa? And he's like, just like, all right, fine, I'll be the Santa too. I can't remember exactly how that worked out.
Yeah, fairly close. I mean, he's a detective. He drinks his way out of the job, and he down on his luck, looking for a job. They hire him as security, and then eventually, once the elf murders the Santa by stabbing him repeatedly in the crotch in the department store, he gets the job as Santa. But then, of course, when he goes into his Santa dressing room, they still have the tape outline of the body with the blood stains on the crotch. And then, of course, he's like, analyzing the crimes. He's like, no, man, I'm not a detective anymore. I can't do it. It's just, and the fact that Haggerty just commits to it 100%, and he plays it as real as any Grizzly Adams Christmas special would be. I mean, he like honestly, everybody in the movie plays it 100% straight, which makes it even more amazing when you have to do long speeches about elf sperm cells and haploid genes, and like they start getting into like the Nazis experimenting with elves as assassins. And it's all treated very like very matter of factly, which just makes it all just chef kiss. I mean, it's like up there with like Troll 2 as like one of the great awful movies of all time.
Yeah, it's definitely in that category. It's essentially your Christmas version of like a Troll 2 or one of those kinds of
Absolutely.
movies. Yeah. And I mean the Haggerty element, like, because I was looking at his age, he's born in 42, so he was like 47 when he made Elves, which, we're getting into that age territory. And I remember the scene when the kids are like hanging out at the mall, or it's not the mall, it's like a store. That's which I think we're starting to get more younger people listening to the podcast here. And so for people that are younger, the thing about when you watch Elves is that you get kind of a slice of like this sort of this error that was ending when it came to shops and stores and things like that, where the mall hadn't fully killed kind of the downtown department store yet. And so they're in this small downtown department store, and like the girl who works there, who's like the main character, she and her friends are having like an after hours party, like the mall, the mall is closed, and he's like the security guard. And it's just great where he's like kind of like he's the authority figure, and he's just like, go ahead and party, just keep it down or whatever, and it's like I had to like, watching it now, right, where I'm in my 40s too, I'm Dan Haggerty, right? I'm the one who's telling these kids to, like being the cool older guy, letting the kids party at the place there. And of course, the security there is, right, you just duct tape the deadbolt or something so you can get in and out, right? There's no like real like security system. Like nowadays, the whole thing would be completely covered in cameras and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that whole sequence, like the half the movie hinges on duct tape,
Right.
because there's this whole, it's Hitchcockian almost, because it's like, who's got the duct tape? Who is the door duct taped or not? Can the boyfriends get in? Can the girls open the door? Can Dan Haggerty sneak back into his little dressing room? I mean, it's laughable because it's so, there are all these like extra edits in there to make the audience keenly aware of where the duct tape is or is not. And it's just one of these just like standout sequences that you're just like, this is really well made. I just like, but it's in a movie about Nazi Christmas elves.
Yeah. And then Haggerty has like the classic department store battle scene with one of the elves, which is just always I mean, anytime you use like department stores for those kinds of things, always really great. And it's like, yeah, and I mean, this the whole thing around the elves and the fact that her grandfather and mother conceived the girl, so it's like she's got her mom and her grandfather as her father as well, which is just all kinds of a trippy thing. So then you've got Dan Haggerty as almost like a father figure, which I mean, of course you got to love. I mean, I'm a little young for Battle of the Network Stars, but Haggerty had that that kind of like fun fatherly vibe to him that makes that even kind of more fun. I don't know if fun's the right term, but the way like it's almost like he cuts a little bit of the tension of how ridiculous all of that stuff is.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the he has like this tender little monologue about like when he was a kid, his dog died, and and he's like, yeah, I had a dog named Pea Shooter. I love that dog. And it's just like it's so genuine, and you just don't expect it amid all the schlock,
Right,
and it just
yeah.
it's like the pearl in the oyster.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, with all the Christmas movies that you have available to you right now, we just discussed like how many you have, right? Just like the large volume of them out there. I think if you're looking for a Christmas movie, and I think, I've always been one of those proponents of Die Hard as a Christmas movie and all of that, but Elves is one of the few that, like, even if you consider Die Hard to be a Christmas movie, which I do consider to be a Christmas movie, but Elves is one of the few that I would put above Die Hard as like a favorite Christmas movie, because it is, Die Hard's fun, but this is like up there as another level.
I mean, Elves is the only movie that I know of that rips off both Chinatown and Dawn of the Dead in the same movie. So, I mean, that praise doesn't come much higher than that.
Exactly. No, I think it's available on YouTube still. I think that's like the best way to get it, unless you go out and get yourself a VHS copy, which you could do as well. But I think it's available on YouTube, to to rent, or not to rent, to watch on there. Yeah, obviously, I mean, I don't have a VHS copy of it. I would love to get one at some point, but let me just double check while we're chatting here. Elves, well, it has trailer. I don't want the trailer. I want the movie, but yeah, I think that was how I watched it originally. Was oh yeah, it's on there still. Yeah, 2 years ago. So actually, it's interesting. The episode or the version that's on there is only 2 years old and only has 2.6 2.6 thousand views. So not a lot of people are watching Elves like they should. Get in there and watch Elves. It's one of the best. And if it's only been there for a couple of years, I wonder if that means that there's going to be a point where they do get a better version of it at some point, like maybe a Blu-ray or something.
Well, from what I understand, I think Vinegar Syndrome was interested in releasing a Blu-ray, but the fact that it was shot on film and then edited on video makes it there's like that extra step in there that makes it harder to master or something, and it would mean basically they'd have to like kind of start from scratch with it.
Okay.
So like that's why, and that's a reason why it has that just like that off look to it. The whole movie has like this like sheen to it that's kind of like, I guess, from the video playing off of the film. So it has this weird look to it, and I fear that if anyone put a Blu-ray edition out, it would lose that kind of luster.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because I haven't seen any of the Blu-rays of some of the other AIP films. I know Man Killers had a Blu-ray. I haven't seen that version yet. But because I know and I guess I don't know to what extent this is an AIP film. This AIP just distributed it. I guess they were just the distributors. They weren't part of the actual production of it. So maybe it's a little bit different there. But yeah, because it has a little bit of that feel of like what you get from those AIP films, like Deadly Prey is another one that has a similar look to it. I think to Elves.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, we were renting junk from the video store about the same era, and a lot of it like the PM movies always have the same kind of look. The Corman movies always had that same kind of like you knew when you were watching something. You could watch like 2 minutes of something and know, oh, this is a New Concord movie, or oh, this is the AIP or a PM, just from the way it was kind of, I won't say manufactured, but like I said, it's like an assembly line for a lot of these companies.
Yeah, and it always felt like AIP, I think, was the junkiest out of all of them, right? That like the New Concord thing, it was like it depended like what year, what era it was shot in, but definitely like the 80s Philippine ones where I think it was Albert Pian talked about this, that like the Philippines, like or any areas of the world that are closer to the equator, the sunlight's a little different there, and so it makes shooting it gives it almost like a washed out quality to begin with. So that's why you get like those movies like in the Philippines or Indonesia or Thailand kind of all have a certain look to them. That's one of the things he was talking about there, but also. When he moves to LA, with Conquer New Horizons moves to LA with those Wilson films, those ones look more PM-ish, because it's almost like they're all shot in LA. But you're right that there's just a little difference, like especially with some of these movies, and then like AIP is sort of like another level below them. It felt like.
Yeah, and where this was like I think it was just distributed by AIP, so it's even has like this even more like one more layer removed from the AIP stable. So it's like I said, it's just like a magical one of a kind kind of look to it.
Yeah. So definitely for people out there looking for your Christmas viewing, Elves is definitely one. I think we it's kind of a yearly thing when you're on the podcast that we bring up Elves again. But I think I don't think we can sell this enough to people, and especially for younger listeners out there, because according to Spotify, we have some younger demographic, sort of like people in their 20s. So most of the demographic is around our age, mostly late 30s to mid 40s. That's kind of like the bulk of our listening. But there are people that are a little bit younger, and it's like I know for younger people, like they want to get into VHS, they want to get into these kinds of things. Go onto YouTube and check this out, because you might be able to find it on VHS. But my hunch is that it's just going to keep getting more expensive as it becomes more rare.
And I mean, what'd you say, 2.4 thousand views? I mean, to quote Matthew McConaughey in Wolf of Wall Street, those are rookie numbers. We got to bump those numbers up.
Exactly. So everybody get out there and watch some more Elves. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Now this might be maybe the rookies number. That's maybe a good transition for us here because we are going to be talking about Steven Seagal here and one of the True Justice movies, the Deadly Crossing film. And so I thought this was a really great idea that you had about doing one of these because I haven't talked Seagal with you on here before, so I thought that would be a really great opportunity for us.
Yeah, I mean, like, so much has been given, written and said about uh, Taylor Swift and the eras for. Well, Seagal has more eras than Taylor Swift does. He's got so many like golden periods and like not so golden periods and just some pretty stinky periods. But like it's very very once you start delving deep into like his filmography, you start seeing like and a lot of this, we have to stop and pause and say that, hey, Outlaw Vern did the definitive work on Steven Seagal's filmography with Seagology, and
Yes.
that's totally, like anybody listening to this needs to go and just what we're going to be talking about. I mean, Vern is he mined that years ago, and he did it so well that we're all in his shadow. Any conversation that starts with Seagal, I think you got to mention Outlaw Vern in the same breath.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, especially the direct to video stuff, like dealt with it quite the way he did, where he really puts it in a proper context. That like you said, it's really great stuff. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I concur with you on that. That Outlaw Vert is kind of the authority on Seagal. That Seagalology is kind of one of those books that people should check out.
Yeah, because I mean, he gets into like the reoccurring themes and the the reusing of actors and the Buddhist philosophy that runs through his films. Yeah, I mean, and it's uh, you know after listening to this, everybody needs to just run out and just buy a copy. It's one of those books that needs to be on every movie lover's bookshelf.
Right, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and I think you talk about the different eras for Seagal. I think one of the more fascinating things about him is that I don't know if anybody he's come out of the gate with four movies that are as fantastic as his first four, right? Above the Law, Hard to Kill, Marked for Death, and Out for Justice, which I believe are all on Tubi right now. It's like they go on Tubi, then Tubi says they're coming down. So I don't know. But it's almost like this sense of like, okay, Seagal is just it, right? And it feels like Under Siege should have been because that's his fifth movie, should have been as good as those. But it's almost like Under Siege starts like that another period of him, which is I don't know if I'd say fall from grace period, but it's almost there's something about that second group of movies. I know. I think Ty from Comfits or Brett, well, maybe both of them have mentioned that the reason why Under Siege is the end for Seagal, or it starts like kind of another era for him, is it's the first movie that doesn't have three words in the title. And so it's just Under Siege. It should have been Under the Siege, and then maybe it would have been better. So, but it's interesting, right? That like he started off with such a bang. It's almost like he's lived off of those four movies for I don't for what 30 years now at this stage.
Well, what's amazing is that beyond, I think he was an Aikido advisor on Never Say Never Again, where he accidentally, quote unquote, accidentally broke Sean Connery's wrist.
Right.
Other than that, and I think he may have been an advisor here, that he was never in a movie. Most people have to work their way up. Even like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Chuck Norris started as either somebody like a henchman or a bad guy. Seagal comes out of the gate with a starring role, name above the title,
Right.
in a stat cast of like Sharon Stone, Henry Silva, Pam Grier. I mean, with a pretty strong director in Andrew Davis, uh, in Above the Law, and uh, it's a damn good movie, and
Right.
he's damn good. And when you watch it, you forget how svelte he is or was, and how just he could act and he could kick ass.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you go back to those movies, those four, because I was on, I can't remember if I had Ty and Brett on here or I was on theirs where we did our top five Seagals, and four of my top five are those first four movies that he did, and you're right. I mean, he was in his late 30s when he had his first movie too. So that's another piece of it, right? Is that he was, most of the time, like you look at like Van Damme, for example, he's doing movies in his mid 20s, and Seagal's like 10 years older than Van Damme, and they come up at the same time, and they're both making these really great movies in the late 80s like this. But like you said, to be to be the one that the name above the title for his first movie, and like you said, like I mean, Van Damme's another great example, right? He was the henchman in Black Eagle, right? He's the bad guy in No Retreat, No Surrender, or like Lundgren at least was a henchman in View to a Kill before he gets Rocky IV. So Seagal just kind of starts off right away, and maybe that colors what happens to him after there, because he almost kind of starts to believe his own hype, or think that it's just so easy for him to do this, that he can just keep making these huge hits when. Under Siege is kind of the first one that starts to fall off a bit, where it's like, Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey kind of outdo him in that. And then we get into that 90s period where the end comes kind of quick for him. He gets like that one last blip with Exit Wounds. But for the most part, he kind of falls down into the DTV well, and that's where he stays from, the early 2000s on.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when it was a shock when The Patriot went right to HBO.
Right.
Because he had just did like Under Siege 2 and like Fire Down Below. I mean, he was still kind of, like you said, like, it kind of a step down, but like, you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe that was just a one-off. And then, like you said, like, he got Exit Wounds, which was sort of a return to form, but it was kind of more of one of those Joel Silver early 2000s movies where he would pair a rapper with a known kung fu star, like Romeo Must Die. It was I think to kind of play to the urban market while also playing to the action market, because there's a cross section there of fan bases. And I think that was more of like, oh, we need a kung fu guy, not necessarily, oh, get me Steven Seagal.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because that's the one that's sort of like this last gasp that he has, and they try to recreate it with Half Past Dead, which I think part of the reason why Exit Wounds works so well is that DMX is such a screen presence, whereas Ja Rule is not quite there. Of course, in between, right, we get his one Albert Pyun film, Ticker, which is just fascinating in itself that he did an Albert Pyun film, because Dolph never did an Albert Pyun. Obviously, we know Van Damme's history with Pyun, but most of the big names did not do. I guess Gary Daniels was another name that did it, Albert Pyun film, but for the most part, these guys, these big action guys weren't necessarily doing those films with him. But Seagal has his one Pyun film, which of course has Tom Sizemore in it as well, and a bunch of other names, Dennis Hopper. It's a fascinating. It's fascinating when we get into that period. I don't even know what we would call that period. It's sort of like the lesser theatrical movies, the last gasp of Exit Wounds, and then we go straight into DTV.
And Ticker is like an interesting kind of one-off, I would say, because it was like kind of, you get this feeling where he's like, well, I'll do it, but you got to put me on stage singing the blues. Right. And Pyun will do anything to get a movie made, and it seemed more like you're like, okay, let's do that. That'll some running time, and that's less editing I got to do. And I think I remember reading somewhere where I think they only had Dennis Hopper for like a day,
right,
or two, and like they were done in like half a day, and he's like, "You serious? We're done?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, go." Yeah. It's like they did something where like instead of having a big scene, they just did all the scenes like in a phone booth or something, and then that way they just shot him out real quick. And he was like, "No, I'll stay," and they're like, "No, get out of here."
Yeah, well, because he talked about when Hopper passed away, he posted on Facebook about that Pyun, that he was like, yeah, I went in and talked to him and I said, yeah, you're done. And he's like, wait, that's it? You got everything? And he's like, yeah, that's it. And I guess Hopper was surprised that he had done so much, that he had bet, that so much had he had shot that much in that time. But yeah, I think Pyun is one of those guys that like he just gets all the footage he can. Though apparently, I guess I was looking at the credits here that I guess he said his funding was cut off by New Image halfway through, and so he I guess they took it from him and edited it. So I guess he's got his own like director's cut, which I've never seen before. But so there's always something like that with Pyun's movies, right? There's always a distributor or a production company that's taking it from him.
Well, yeah, he must have more director's cuts, locked away somewhere than any filmmaker.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. So like, yeah, this is like just another one of those, but it is interesting, like you said, that Seagal, is he gets his one scene in this, and I guess too, like he probably didn't know how good Exit Wounds was going to be, so he was like, okay, well, I need this role here in Ticker, I need to make this one as well, and then Exit Wounds ends up becoming a huge hit, and it's like, okay, well now I'm going to try to go back into the theater, but then Half Past Ted didn't work, and I think Foreigner was one that he does. That's kind of his first DTV one after Half Past Dead. That I really like that one. That one borrowed from all kinds of like film noir traditions, and it seemed like it really worked. But after Foreigner, that's when you get into those like I don't know, I don't want to say mailing it in Seagal roles, but it's definitely like the kind of stuff that Outlaw Vern really gets in, sinks his teeth into. It's kind of like I don't even know what we would call that period. The initial mailing it in period, something like that.
Well, I mean, the way I look at that period is it's like you have a checklist,
right,
of what you're going to get into when you watch it. It's like, okay, first of all, is he using his real voice?
Right.
Because there are so many instances where it's obviously dubbed by somebody else, and it's not even like close. It just sounds like some guy they got at a convenience store that had the sore throat. He's like, "Hey guys, let's go over here," and it's like, well, it's so not like close,
right?
And it's one thing for like if it's a ADR where like he's in the car and they got to explain like, oh, I got to go downtown to check my the mailbox or something to link the scenes together. But it would be like a dialogue scene and like the mouth is moving and it's not matching like a kung fu movie. So that's like one. And then like the two is like, does he spend half the movie sitting down? Because there's a lot of these where he's either at a desk or in the car, and like it's like, oh well, yeah, okay, like because we'll get this at like Deadly Crossing, a lot of the movie he's either at a desk or in his car. So it's like, and it's like, okay, is he wearing all black to hide his ever expanding girth? Yeah, okay. How low is the widow's peak in this one?
Right.
And then, I a lot of people fault him for like kind of. I think I forgot who. I don't know if it was Vern. Somebody like coined like the patty cake fight scenes.
Oh yes, I think
it's just him slapping people.
Yes.
And so like and I can't really get on him too much for that because the whole point of Aikido is to kind of redirect your enemies. Movement against you. So it's not like I'm not expecting him to do these Jackie Chan type stunts, but he has to be in the same shot with with the guy he's fighting. If he's not in the same shot with the guy he's fighting, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, I think what I was doing when I started the blog, I was referring to it as like his slap chop technique, and there would be those scenes where it was just like his face, right, and he'd kind of have like this look on his face like he was really getting into something, and he'd be like slapping all over the place in front of him, and then you'd cut to another scene of a guy getting hit or something like that. And it was I think there was one of them where I can't remember which one it was, where I was able to get a shot of him doing the slap chop thing, like kind of from like the point of view shot, right, where you see him kind of coming at you like that. And yeah, the sitting thing, I think, is one of those things that just like over time, right, he develops this technique. And I don't know where that one starts, where this technique starts. I want to say it's like maybe like you get into like A Dangerous Man. You get into like the late 2000s into the early 2010s. He has this technique of a younger guy doing the heavy lifting, right? Whether it's Byron Mann or Bren Foster, whoever it is like the one who's out there like doing all this stuff. And then he just shows up every once in a while and slap chops a guy and like, bends their wrist back or something like that and throws him through a glass table. And it's like, oh, he's the hero as opposed to this other guy.
Yeah, and it's a very it's I'm just kind of like I don't know if analytical mindset is the right term here, but like when I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to figure out, okay, the last one I saw, was he wearing the same outfit? Because if he filmed 3 movies in like, a week and they just kind of parcel out the footage into, into his next 3 features. Because there's a lot of like Against the Dark, where he's not even in the main thrust of the story. He's walking down the street killing vampires, and and most of the time they're following these other characters, and eventually their paths do cross, but it's not meaningful enough for it to be like a big revelation or anything. It's just enough to get his face on the video box.
Right. Well, then there's the other thing is the mitigating the fact that he can't lose, right? And so there's always these, like, especially if he plays a baddie, they have to figure out how do you mitigate the fact that he can't lose. So like you've got Beyond the Law, which is his most recent film. He hasn't done anything since 2019's Beyond the Law, which was reuniting him with DMX. But Johnny Mesner's the good guy, Seagal's the bad guy, and essentially Seagal beats up Johnny Mesner and defeats him, but Johnny Mesner like recorded him, like I guess confessing to a murder or something like that. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but that's how he defeats him there. Or you've got another Johnny Mesner one, The Perfect Weapon, where it turns out that Mesner didn't kill Seagal, right? He killed his double. And so that's the other piece too, right? Is that Seagal can never lose, right? It kind of makes these fight scenes like really kind of a waste, because it's like you get this baddie, and you spend all this time developing this baddie, and then Seagal just like chops him up a little bit and throws him into a glass table, and that's it. He's defeated him.
Yeah, and I think I don't really consider it a Seagal film because he's just the villain in it, but the scene in Machete where he's the villain, and he does get killed, but it's so over the top, and you can almost see like him and Robert Rodriguez having a discussion of how this is going to go down, because when he gets stabbed with the machete, he's like, see this ain't shit.
right, exactly. right.
So it's like, and he like basically twisted it. It's like he's got to be the one killing it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
so but it's done as almost kind of like a spoof of that scenario. What would happen if Seagal is finally bested? Well, he probably just looks, oh, that ain't shit, man.
Exactly.
That's like another thing you gotta look out for. It's like, how many accents is he using? Because like he always like patronizes the African American characters. Well, he'll come up, and we see this like in Steven Seagal Lawman, the cop show he was on, where I guess he thinks he's getting brownie points by kind of talking with a black accent to an African American man. Hey man, what's up? What's going on over here, man? Or he'll be talking to like a Cajun fisherman or something, and he'll be talking about he from New Orleans. Yeah, and it's like, and it's so funny because it's like it comes out of nowhere. It's like all of a sudden he's like Rich Little or something. He's doing all these voices.
And then there's that, and then of course there's the appropriation with Native American cultures and Asian cultures, and it's like, it's like this thing where I guess like I think in real life he was like born in Michigan near Detroit, and then his family moved to Southern California. And I don't know if he just feels like, just being a white guy from Southern California is too boring, and so I've got to be all these other things instead. But like you said, it has this sort of like this condescending kind of element to it, which that's another piece of it that I think that you see in these movies, where it's like he's being like a hero to disadvantaged people, but in a way that's like very like patronizing, like I'm the benevolent white guy who's going to help out this Native American community who's dealing with the oil barons, or I'm the benevolent white guy that's going to help this African American community who's dealing with a bad guy or something like that. There's always that vibe to it that like, I don't know if it makes you. I think when we watch this, because we don't really take Seagal that seriously, we get a kick out of it. But it is like another one of those elements that you can kind of check the box off on when you're watching a Seagal film.
Yeah, I mean, then especially like in the ones where he's trying to save nature, like on deadly ground and fire down below, where he just like scene where like yes, they want he wants to portray himself as this benevolent, uh, kind of Native American, representation of but it comes off as like a half-assed Billy Jack, because for all the talking and all the speeches about the plankton dying and all that stuff, he's still just like Steven Seagal and breaking people's wrists and smashing them in the nose and stuff. So it's like it doesn't really it's two ill-fitting halves.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing. And then again, sort of kind of coming back to that point where all of this is really built off of 4 movies, that like this whole career that he's had. I think it's like all of it is like, whenever people, I think for us, so as, sort of this, where we consume all of these Seagal movies and we get a kick out of all of them. But I think for a lot of people, they go to a Tubi or Netflix or whatever whatever their streaming service is, and they're browsing things and they see something with Seagal on the cover and they think, oh, marked for death, above the law. Oh, it's Seagal. Let me watch this. That's so and I think he's managed to like get this career out of that whole piece of it where people just want to watch more Seagal because of those movies when they're looking for something, and a distributor's like, yeah, we'll give him a few $1,000,000 to make this movie and he can just sit the whole time. That'll work for us.
And then I was really hopeful when he did Sniper with Fred Olin Ray that was going to open like a new door of him just showing up in all these Fred Olin Ray movies, but that kind of turned out to just be a one-off. But Sniper does have my favorite box art probably of all time, where it's
Yes.
Seagal and Van Damme.
Right.
But if you don't read the fine print, it's Rob Van Dam,
Right.
not Jean-Claude Van Damme.
And it's his head tacked on a much more fit soldier. I think it was Simon at Explosive Action who, when he did his review of Sniper, he counted the total amount of time that Seagal is actually standing in that movie, because he sits most of the time. And then of course, Tim Abel, who's definitely a friend of Fred Olin Ray's, like a definite Fred Olin Ray mainstay. Tim Abel's the one who does all the heavy lifting in Sniper Special Ops, which it's like it's like there's like it's almost like you said, like there's almost like 2 movies, right, where it's like Tim Abel doing this almost like a screwball comedy thing with this woman who's a reporter, where like she's in the way, but now they're kind of having a thing together, and it's almost like a His Girl Friday kind of thing there that Fred Olin Ray's doing. Plus, you've got like the action sequences with the the military guys out on a mission and having to get shot out and shoot back. And then you've got Seagal, who's just sort of sitting most of the movie, and in his scenes he's just sort of sitting and he's doesn't really even say much even. And it's just like a very fascinating mismatch that I think only someone like a Fred Olin Ray could put together the way he did.
Yeah, and I think they gave a valid reason for him to be sitting, because he's a sniper. He's got to wait for something to happen. But so does the audience. So,
Right.
so yeah. But like that, kind of goes back to like Deadly Crossing with the True Justice series. They found a legitimate way to find him to be sitting at a desk, to be delegating others to do the heavy lifting, while he just kind of gets reports, updates on the plot or whatever. And then when it comes time to get the perp or whatever, he's on point, and then they'll run him down. And then when the guy runs out of the building, he's there to hit him with the car door and like arrest him.
Exactly. Yeah.
He doesn't do too much like TJ Hooker, like like
Right.
jumping across the hood of the car or anything. He just kind of does his thing. I mean, there are episodes, other than this one. I say episodes; it's 2 episodes of a show slapped together. It's kind of like what they used to do. That's kind of why I did like Deadly Crossing and the True Justice movies in general, because they do harken back to like the '70s tactic of slapping 2 episodes of a TV show and passing it off as a movie. And it's refreshing to. I mean, there are some overreaching arcs arcs to get you to that next episode. So it's not like a riding with death where the guy winds up with a mustache in the second half of the movie. So it's but like I don't know, for me, like it for where he was at in his career, it was I think it was the right move to do a TV show, to kind of like do a Walker Texas Ranger, not of that quality, but like that type, or to just remind people that he can still kick ass, maybe not like he used to do in the 80s and 90s, but he's still name enough to carry a series week to week.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Maybe this is a good segue. Maybe what we'll do is we'll take a break here, and then we'll get into some to Deadly Crossing, because I think it's a good segue here into that section. So what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the 2-episode movie, True Justice: Deadly Crossing. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. All right, we are back, and we're going to be talking about one of the True Justice movies, like you were talking about, that is on Tubi, Deadly Crossing, and you brought up a really great point, because those 70s like 2-episode movie things that they did. I think it was like because the TV show didn't get to like rerun syndication, but they wanted to do something with it, so they would like package it as movies as a way to like, I guess, recoup some of that money.
Yeah, or there would be like a summer hiatus or something, or they needed, time slots to fill, like for sports games or something. So they would slap stuff together, and maybe a show that hadn't been either, maybe not had aired their entire run, that got canceled before, so they were still stuck with these 2 episodes that they didn't know what to do with. And then a lot of times, the shows would be kind of obscure, or at least, canceled really quickly, so they could almost repackage it as like something quote unquote new. But a lot of the times too, it would be stuff that people were familiar with, and it was like either a 2-part episode, and they would just kind of, a lot of times, like they would sell the pilots of a television show as a quote unquote movie too. So, or at least a TV movie of the week kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because then, I couldn't figure out exactly from like trivia or anything like whose decision it was to do that with True Justice, right? Because as we know, right, in the 2010s, by that point, most TV series were released as complete series on DVD, even if they only made it for 1 or 2 seasons like this did, that you'd release, the like a whole, set of season 1 and a whole set of season 2. Whereas instead, they decided to make these into individual movies. I always want to blame Seagal for these things, but I don't know if this one was actually his fault or if the distributors decided to make that decision.
Well, and usually nowadays, when they do something like that, they're selling it to an overseas market that maybe doesn't have access to the television right. So that's like their way of seeing the film, but like, yeah, it is kind of almost like an ass backwards kind of thing, because I remember True Justice came out, and then almost immediately the quote unquote movies were like on Netflix like months later.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really great point too. It's funny because the producer of this series, Benjamin Sachs, he was interviewed on he was a guest on Sean Malloy's I Must Break This podcast, mostly because he'd done some Dolph films like Stormcatcher. He was a producer on Stormcatcher, and so that was really why Sean Malloy wanted to talk to him about that. But Dolph came up. I'm sorry, Seagal came up because he produced a lot of these. One of the funniest stories he told about this was that Seagal always does his lines through cue cards, right? So they have the cue cards up there, and he's looking at the cue cards, and he sees the name Elijah Kane, and he's like, "Who the hell is Elijah Kane?" And they're like, "Well, you're Elijah Kane." He's like, "What? That's the stupidest name ever." He's like, "You created the show. This is your character that you created. It's Elijah Kane." And I guess he stormed off. I think they had to like kind of bring him back and like explain it to him that like, no, this is you came up with this, but he thought it was like a horrible name, even though that was the name that he created.
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, that story alone kind of tells you, what the great minds that are working, with this series. It's the Seagal, of course. That just sounds to me like a classic Seagal putting the cart before the ox kind of thing. So, um, I mean, it's to me, and honestly, when you hear the idea of, oh, it's a police procedural with Seagal, who's maybe in 20 minutes of each episode, you're like, kind of wince, and you're like, but I mean, it's kind of, he used like Keone Waxman, who did a lot of his films. So it's definitely kind of in his wheelhouse, and it not only plays to his strengths, but it plays to his weaknesses, like I said, him being able to be behind a desk, delegate chores to the supporting cast, get that important phone call, so he can run out at the end to fight the villain at the end. So in that respect, like if you measure your expectations, I mean, I think I would say better than a lot of the films that he was starring in at the time.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point that you can look at. I mean, obviously he does Machete at this time, but yeah, I mean that 2010 to 2012 period, he's doing, Dangerous Man, Born to Raise Hell, Maximum Conviction. So from a movie standpoint, like the movies had really gotten to a point where they were just like, what Secret Service thing is Seagal going to, former Secret Service guy's going to be, or what is his like role, like it was kind of like all like the formula had just gotten so stale at that point. And like you said, this is an interesting use of the formula because like he sits behind a desk, he's spouting off like police jargon, and of course like the people that are acting with him that are on the other receiving ends of these phones are just repeating police jargon with him, right? Everybody says copy when they're saying yes about something, they're it's all that kind of stuff, 211 this one that, that kind of thing. But it's interesting because I think the one thing about this one that is interesting, right, is that we get this whole group of characters here, and until they bring in Sarah Lind, I don't know if I really cared too much about everybody else in the group. I like Sarah Lind's character, but I don't know if I cared about anybody else in the group.
Yeah, well, right away, you have the cop Radner, who's the guy obviously that doesn't play by the rules, and the Mason is the one that goes by the book, and then the female characters are there to show that they can get things done just as well as the guys. It's very formulaic, but I mean as far as formulas go, it's if all the ingredients are there. I wouldn't say it's hard to screw up, but like, it makes it easier when you're working with a durable template.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because this feels like, I mean, it was made for reels, but this feels like your classic like syndicated TV show from like the 90s or 2000s. And I mean, I guess that's back then there was, and by the time we hit the 2010s, there isn't really any kind of syndicated TV beyond like judge shows and things like that. So, a channel like Reels is where you'd have to bring something like this, but it has that feel to it. I mean, it definitely doesn't feel like a movie for sure. It feels like if you put two Highlander episodes together or something like that.
Yeah, well, you make a good point because it does feel like one of those action-packed movie shows from the 90s, like the Kung Fu, The Legend Continues.
Right.
I'm trying to think of, there was another one too, but it was like, was it Lost Sun or Sun Red Sun? It was something, but they were always like these shows that like I'd always see advertised, but I never got. It was like, well, I'd watch that, but it's not syndicated in my area, but it does feel like a throwback to those late 90s shows, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that in a way that almost makes this work. I don't know if work is the right word, but it feels like a little bit better because it does feel. I mean, yeah, I think it almost feels like better than one of the movies because of that, because it's like some sort of like a novelty that we don't get anymore.
Yeah, I mean it like I said, if you manage your expectations, and it's better than a a TV show, cop show starring Steven Seagal really should be. Now, when you get into some of the later episodes, like any series, there's some ups and downs and stuff. But they start off pretty strong with Deadly Crossing, and yeah, along the way there are some, kind of yeah, they don't have any bottle episodes, but like there's like some episodes where they're definitely kind of just treading water until the finale. But that's every show. That's a pitfall of every show.
Yeah, and it is interesting. It was just to give people a sense too. I kind of forgot to do the synopsis of the plot on this one, but it's not much really. It's just that there's uh, heroin being sold on the streets of Seattle. They're trying to figure out where it's coming from. So, Seagal and his team, they're sort of like this sort of crack, like I guess they do undercover stuff, but they're kind of this crack like investigative team that really handles the worst of the worst, right? They aren't looking for jaywalkers. They want like, the big drug dealers. And as they start to kind of unravel this case of heroin being sold in Seattle, it leads to this Russian crime boss played by Gil Bellows, which just is fascinating in and of itself. That we've got Gil Bellows from Ally McBeal, I think, right? Was that the show he did?
Yeah.
Yeah, and now he's here as a Russian baddie. Whether his accent works or not doesn't matter, right? It's just that, and I mean, it was kind of fun to watch him getting tossed around by Seagal at the end. I mean, I don't know if it was fun for him. I've heard he's like really rough to work with if you're a stunt guy or something like that. But it was kind of fun for us to see that happen there. But as we talked about, most of the work is being done by the team. They're out kind of, working, and they're divided into two groups, right? We got the two men, Radner and Mason, and then we got the two women, Sarah, who, Sarah Lynn plays a character named Sarah, which makes it a lot easier, I think, for Seagal to keep track of it. But then we've got Juliet is the other, the kind of more veteran female cop, and they're just kind of out there, kind of doing their thing, bringing back information to Seagal, and he's like, okay, let's go out and do something. And then, like you said, Seagal kind of sits in his SUV, or he sits behind a desk and gives orders. And then with the SUV, it's kind of like, yeah, he either hits people with his car door, or he gets out and gives them a little slap chopping, throws them around, and then they arrest them.
Yeah, and later on there are episodes slash movies, however you want to classify them, where he does get to do a little bit more. I think there's one where it's either like a member of his old troop has like PTSD, and he gets him some help, and I mean they do find opportunities to kind of you know get him out from behind the desk. But I think the first two episodes and the last two, I think, was that Urban Warfare. I can't remember, but I remember when I binged all of them. Like the first and the last were like the strongest, which is typical of any TV show. They want to suck viewers in on the premiere and then bring them back in, for the finale. So those were good bookends. But I think along the way too, they had like one episode had like George Takei as the coroner. And so that was like a random guest star. I was like, oh man, that was. But he had those scenes with Seagal, which was unfortunate because I would really like to see, Seagal playing off the Sulu.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is It's like so I should point out that I have not seen any of these before. So I saw these two were my first foray into the Seagal, because one of the things that I could not figure out, I was trying to figure out which movies came first, or like what was the right order for them. And so when you picked this one, I was like, oh, this ends up being the first one. Oh, this is perfect. But that was one of the problems for me. I've never seen these before, and I think I was trying to figure out what to do with them. Like, do I want to do I want to review them as movies? That, like if you go on Letterbox, they were all removed from Letterbox, because at one point they had all of these True Justice movies there, and they've since removed them all because they've considered them to be TV shows. And then also too, when you go to IMDb, they've removed them as well. So it's just there's TV shows. So I was trying to figure out, like, do I want to watch them or not? But I have to say, like, it watching these first two was fascinating enough from a Seagal standpoint that, like, as a Seagal, I don't know if I call myself a Seagal fan, a Seagal follower. Maybe that's a better way to do it. But these are fascinating enough that I probably should delve into them further.
Well, the second movie was Dark Vengeance.
Yeah.
The third one was Street Wars. The fourth one was Lethal Justice. The fifth one was Death Riders, and the last one was Urban Warfare.
Okay.
So
that makes sense,
that
because
was the at least the progression order of the show. I don't know, quote unquote release order, but that was how the episodes flowed.
yeah, because that makes sense, because when you know how Tubi, when you finish a movie, if you don't exit out soon enough, they will start the next one on you pretty quickly. And so Dark Vengeance was the one that started for me. And of course, it's one of those things where I don't know if you've caught this with Tubi. I don't know if you use the app at all or anything like that, but like if you exit out of the movie before you even start it, they still ask you, like, what did you think of that movie? And it's like, I didn't even watch it. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, for I'm trying to think, when I first watched, I think I just watched them either on Reels or but like it was one of those where they were just like you said, they're just good enough to keep you watching it, which, I mean, think about how many TV shows now, like you start and you watch 2 or 3 episodes and you're like, and you never get back to. So I mean, for me to say that, yeah, I watched all of them, and mostly because I'm a Seagal completist, but at the same time, it gave you what you were, I don't know if wanting is the right word, but it gave you what you were expecting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it, like you said, gives you what you're expecting. I think it's like, just thinking about Seagal, it's like I haven't watched Safe, the Dolph Lundgren, TV show that he did, but it's like, yeah, I think if I was in the '90s or early 2000s and I was watching Renegade, or I was watching, Highlander, one of those shows, this is what I would want the Seagal version of that to be.
Absolutely, yeah, I can see that 100%.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I think, with when they, because part of the story is Sarah Lind, her character is like new to the group, right? And so it's like one of these things where she's sort of joining in and filling, taking over somebody else, and she's got to prove herself, that kind of thing. But I love Sarah Lind in Wolf Cop, and so that was one of my favorite horror movies that came out in the past. I keep thinking it's actually been like 10 years, I think, since Wolf Cop came out. So it's like, I should say it's not a recent horror movie anymore. But she was really great in that. Of course, she was in Humanity Bureau with Nick Cage. So she's kind of one of those, sort of more prominent Canadian actresses. And so, but when they add her to the cast here, I really liked it. And I would have liked the idea of like a movie where she's the one doing the heavy lifting, the way like a Byron Mann or somebody that does.
Yeah, and I think, they kind of get into it like the second part of the episode, movie, whatever, she does, they're like, oh, well, let the newbie take point, and she kind of proves herself. And then, like, I think there's later on, I don't think it's her, I think it's Megan Ori. Like there's either like a rapist that's on the loose, and it's, and she's either had like a past history with the guy, so, but it's handled more kind of with more sensitivity than you would expect from like a Seagal think I don't think she herself is accosted, but like they go into, it's not as exploitative as like it could have been, whether that was because it was made for reels or what. But I remember watching that one and be like, oh, that could have went one way, and they actually kind of handled it like a decent filmmaker would. You know what I mean? It was handled with more care.
Yeah, and I wonder too, like because of being a TV series and that shooting, if like if guys like Keanu Waxman had more of a say in it, or different writers had more of a say in it, if they were able to kind of tame it down for Seagal. Where I think with the movies, right, a lot of times, I mean, though to be fair with the movies, like a lot of times he's like this knight in shining armor character, right? That there's like these women who are like maybe like they've been trafficked and he's rescuing them, and they like owe their lives to him, and they just want to make love to him or whatever. That he does sometimes do that kind of piece to it. But I think from a TV show standpoint, you're right. Like some of these elements are handled a little bit better than you would expect from a 90-minute Seagal film.
Yeah, and of course, like there's that random scene at the end where like he walks off into the sunset with the hot woman that's never mentioned before or after. It's just like a weird way to like send him off like on in the episode to wrap everything up. It's just kind of like, I don't know, charming's the word, but it's corny. What, I don't know, but it's just it works.
Well, because it's such a trip. Because that's the other thing with Seagal, right? Is there always has to be this like, man, he's the greatest, right? Seagal is the best ever. Like all the characters have to talk about how he's the greatest. And there's like this woman who's, I guess, like an ex of his who's like causing trouble. Like she wants to file reports and things like that on him. And then like at the very end of the episode, he's like showing off that he's got a new girlfriend, and that's going to make this woman, I guess, leave him alone, which doesn't make any sense. But it is like this whole thing of like, oh, he's got a new girlfriend, and suddenly like like the guys and even the women are like really impressed, like, oh, he's so great with this hot woman that he's got with him, and they're getting to the SUV and driving off. And it was kind of one of those like, look at me, how great am I? I'm the best character of the show moment there.
Yeah, and I think too, I don't know if they went into this whole kind of uh, enterprise thinking that was the plan to kind of divvy up 2 episodes per movie, because it's kind of interesting because the end of the first episode slash half of the movie, it kind the girl, the cop who performs the hit for the Russians, she gives up a name or whatever, and that's the clue that gets you into the next movie. So it's kind of, I wouldn't say seamless, but it works fairly well. So it's just not like this abrupt, okay, well here's another adventure that Seagal and his crew are going on. It's actually some sort of passing of a narrative from episode to episode. And then the second half kind of ends pretty neatly with no other strings attached. So it's kind of, just thinking of it now, it's like, I wonder if it was engineered to be like that.
Yeah, you make a great point there, because I was trying to like 2010. I was, or in 2010, 2011, I don't think that we were at that point yet where like Netflix had taken over to this point where you got like these like where a season of a TV series was essentially like a 14-hour movie, which is something that you would get. Netflix did a lot of, where I remember like like the Marvel TV shows that they did, like Daredevil and Luke Cage, Jessica Jones. They were like these long stories, or The Punisher, which is like this long story that would evolve over 13 episodes, and you get this sort of fatigue midway through. And I think you might be right that maybe they already had in their mind that they were going to sell these as movies abroad. And so like let's pair them off as 2-part episodes, almost like Batman, right, in the 60s, right, where it's always a 2-part
Yeah.
episodes, right? That you pair them off like that, and then you can sell them as these packages to abroad. And that for Seagal, right, that probably sold it more for him, that he could make more money. That was another piece that Benjamin Sachs talked about in working with Seagal, is that Seagal kept coming to him and being like, I need another movie, because he needed the few $1 million payday. And Benjamin Sachs got to a point where he's like, listen, I can't. You're hitting that law of diminishing returns. Like you can't, you do 3 movies in the same year, it's harder for me to sell it because it's not making the money that you want. And we get to 2016, he's doing like 5 or 6 movies at a time. I think that was where he really tried to push it and get as many movies out there as possible, because he kept trying to pull money from that you know pull money from that well, and the well is starting to run dry. But I wonder if that was the mindset with this. It's like, when they sold him then the idea of the TV show is he's like, hey, that's like 10 movies or something like that I can sell abroad.
Yeah, I mean that definitely fits his release plan because I think it was like a win-win. The producers get a TV show that they can milk, and he can sell it abroad. So it's just everybody gets a piece of the pie kind of thing.
Yeah, and then you have a channel like Reels that's trying to get content, right? It's trying to have things that it can show. I think now, because it still exists as a channel. I believe I looked it up on Wikipedia, and I guess they have uh like a deal with Peacock. So they show their programming on Peacock. The only thing that they can't show apparently is they have a wrestling. They have MLW Underground Wrestling, and because Peacock has an exclusive rights with WWE, they can't show that. But the rest of their stuff, I guess they show on Peacock. True Justice, I don't think is on there anymore. But they do still exist as a channel, and they do a lot of, like, I guess what True TV kind of stuff, right? Like when I was looking them up online to see if what was on, right, see if I had them on my cable channel, which makes sense that I would, because I have Comcast. They had a show called Jail that was on. It was a reality show that follows suspected criminals through the incarceration process, which just sounds like Cops, only after the fact, right? When what happens in Cops after you get to the police station.
It's funny that you mentioned Cops because the other show Seagal did was Steven Seagal Lawman.
Yeah.
And that was like Cops, but with Steven Seagal. And
right. Yeah, and that's one that they
I
do show on Reels. They've acquired the rights to Steven Seagal Lawman, so you can see that on Reels. But I don't think you can see True Justice on there anymore.
Oh well, I mean, if I had my druthers, I would go with Lawman because I loved how it was presented as fact, which we know reality shows aren't fact, but
Right.
I do remember a story coming out like during Hurricane Katrina, I think, and Seagal was actually down there with the deputies department, like kind of helping people, displaced people, or uh, and like somebody asked me like, "What are you doing here?" And he said like, "Oh well, I volunteer or something," or he was with the parish or whatever. And I don't know if that's how it started. Like, oh well, we need a show about that.
Right.
But and honestly, I don't know if that's real too, because when before he was in Above the Law, he was supposedly in the CIA. Like there was always those rumors he was in the, it's based on his exploits or whatever. So
Right.
it's probably all hogwash. But like what I loved about Lawman was like it would be like Cops or whatever driving around. He'd be spouting his philosophy or whatever, and they'd have like the scenes where he had like some sort of spider sense. Like he would see like a guy on the street walking, and then it would cut the slow motion, and he go, "I don't like the way that guy looked at me, man. I think he's holding. Let's go back." And they'd roll, and then, like and inevitably the guy would have heroin or whatever. Like Seagal, like use his ESP to know, and it's amazing television.
Right. Yeah, it sounds beautiful. One of the things about that show too is that I guess part of the production was halted because of the lawsuit that he had that personal assistant that sued him, saying that like she essentially like was keeping him against her will, and she was escaped. And Rich Haas from DTV Digest, he showed me a short film that was made where they essentially took transcripts of that trial and reenacted it for the court. And the woman who plays the person who was suing, she's played by an actress who's married to John Stamos now, actually. So it's a whole trippy kind of thing. But it was like one of those things where I guess the case was dismissed. I think she may have even pulled. I don't know what exactly happened there, but then they just went back to doing the show like nothing happened. And it's just like, okay, we're making a Steven Seagal Lawman again.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I might have to track that one down.
Yeah, yeah. It's so there was a podcast episode because he was on. Rich was on talking about short films on a podcast episode. It was the last time he was on, so it was a few months ago. But I can see what number the episode is. But there's because also we do the sheep impact. Remember the Seagal thing that so it's August 22nd's episode 132 short shots. That's where Rich mentioned that episode. So it's one of the ones that's mentioned in there. But also the sheep impact, right, where he does that movie for like an Australian beer company.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And then what was the other one? What was it? The Onion movie he was in?
Right. Was that Cock
He was
Puncher?
Cock
Was that?
Puncher.
Yes.
I just saw that one clip, I guess, way back, early internet days, and I was like, okay, that's all I needed to see.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's the funny thing because I've exhausted all the Seagal movies, right? All the direct to video ones, except for I haven't done Clementine and I haven't done the Onion movie yet. So other than that, I've done like all of Seagal's DTV flicks on the site, and I've been debating like, do I want to do like Clementine? You can get like the Korean version of or the original Korean on YouTube, but there isn't an English language version available. So I don't know if you've seen Clementine yet. If you've gone that
No,
far in,
I haven't.
yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, that's I think Simon from Explosive Action got a version of it that's in English. He was able to get it somehow. He's got like all kinds of. He was the one who found like Secret of King Mahi's Island, that mysteriously missing Gary Daniels movie that one of his first movies that nobody was able to find. He found a Japanese VHS of it somehow. So he's kind of found those. But yeah, that's like kind of. I think that's why the True Justice ones have kind of been like sort of this. I don't know if siren song is the right term, but it's sort of like alluring me out there. Like if I want more Seagal on the site, I've got to go to the True Justice movies.
Yeah, and it's one of those too where even if you just found the episodes of the show, you could just watch like episode 3 and 4 and just count it as the movie. Because sometimes when they would put these movies or these episodes together, they would put some linking material or some sort of newly shot footage to kind of pad everything out and to get the time slot. And there's none of that in these. I mean, it's basically like all the whooshing and the washing of the editing, of the city and the people walking and the cars going by, and then it goes right to the office. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even like the Office thing, like when you see like the building it's in, it's very much like Miami Vice, right? Where it's like, it's this, it's not supposed to be a police station, but it is. It's almost like, I mean, they kind of grab that from there, and this idea too, like Sarah Lynn when she first shows up, Seagal gets honored for coming in her uniform, has her dressed in something else, and it's kind of a whole thing there. So she shows up in different clothes, and of course, all the guys think she looks hot when she shows up in her different clothes, and that makes the other woman that's there jealous of that kind of thing. But it's like this whole thing of like we're not supposed to let everybody know that we're cops here. We're doing undercover stuff.
Yeah, and it's really weird too because later on there's like the comic relief like idiot cop that comes in and he's got his uniform on. Nobody says anything about that. So I don't know.
Well, she does, right? Remember,
some...
she gives him a hard time.
Yeah,
Sarah Lynn does.
She does, but nobody else does. So
right.
He just kind of like waltzes in and it was kind of like, is this a gender equality kind of thing? Like she's getting it, nobody, the guy isn't.
Yeah, because that was like a kind of this like reveal with her that like suddenly she's made it right now that she's
right.
She's doing that. Yeah, I think what was his name was Kyle Cassie was his character name, or was his real name as an actor. His character was Brad Gates, which Brad just seems to be a name, right, that you're going to use for like a jerk kind of guy, like a jerky bro-ish guy. It's like here's Kyle. Or sorry, not Kyle. Like Kyle's his real name in real life. I'm making fun of his real name. No, but Brad. Here's Brad. What's going on, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, even down to like that kind of cliche character, I think True Justice, kind of like checks all those boxes of just the cliche. I don't know if safe is the right word, but it's just kind of like not even wholesome, but just kind of like that, like a comfort show, like a dad show.
Right,
what you're getting when you're watching it.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Uh, Recently, I'm sorry, Ty from Come Up with Son, we watched a movie that had Paul Johansson in it. Who was it was the second of the three Bruce Willis Detective Night movies, and so Paul Johansson plays the bad guy. And I was talking about how he did The Raven, with Elizabeth Grace in the Highlander spin-off series, Highlander the Raven. And I kind of got me back into watching, just watching some clips and watching some Highlander. And I was like, man, because I used to binge it. I had all the episodes on DVD. But I remember like getting home from school in the mid to late 90s where USA would do like this double feature thing of like Renegade and Highlander, and it was like this, I don't, like you said, it was like this kind of this comfort food thing. It's like before, making dinner, having dinner, depending on, if my family was making it or I had to get, grab something to eat myself. But it was like one of those things where you get home from school and it's like, oh, here's Highlander and Renegade. It's a nice double feature there. This kind of brings you back a little bit to that, I think.
Yeah, and those were like two of the syndicated action shows that are just kind of, they're always like kind of on, like you might not have, you would watch one episode and you got the whole gist, like Reno Reigns helps some poor bastard in a bar and finds out he used to be a Navy SEAL or something, and then he like gets him back on his feet, and that now the bar is his because it's, and then he
Right.
goes on to the next town, and
Yes.
it's point A to point B, what's going to happen, and in a lot of ways it's still a template of the old, not even the cop shows of the 70s, but even like the Riflemen and
Yeah.
Bonanzas and Gunsmokes of the 50s and 60s. I mean, they're still using that, except with motorcycles instead of horses.
Yeah, it's the exact idea, right? Like, or like with Highlander, it was like another immortal, right? It's like the same way that like you'd have Lucas McCain, in his town, that new people would show up and give him a hard time that he'd have to deal with somehow with with his rifle or whatever. It was almost like the same thing with Duncan MacLeod, where a new immortal would show up, cause problems, and he'd have to behead him at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, there was only 1,000 of them. It was like it was like one of those things where it's like, yeah, I remember when it was only one, like
Right.
13 episodes ago.
Right.
But like
Exactly.
again, you know what you're getting into. It's like
Yeah.
you want to see him, kind of persevere and and find out the lineage, and like I said, oh, there's one more that we forgot to tell you about.
Right.
He's
Right.
on this
Exactly.
parcel of paper. You got to go quest for it. And you know what's going to happen, but you're okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think you're right. Like True Justice gives you a taste of that, and in the 2010s, it was a period of time where TV had really turned into this like completely opposite from the big tent concept that we understood TV to be in the 80s and 90s, where it was like get as many people interested as possible and don't do anything risky. It's like Miami Vice might have been like the riskiest, or like Max Headroom lasts for like 2 seasons because it was like nobody really wanted to deal with that, whereas like Growing Pains will get you 10 seasons, or whatever. That was the idea, right? Don't be too risky. But then you get like HBO coming through, and once they really kind of hit their stride with Sopranos, and then I know Mad Men was AMC, or that kind of thing. But it was like TV had turned into this thing where it was like either it was like really bland, like according to Jim, or it was really edgy. But there's nothing in between, like we used to get in the 90s with these syndicated shows, or with some of these these short run action movies that you get on Fox or something like that. And it's like that kind of thing kind of goes away in the 2010s, that you know nobody wants to just make a show, right? It's like you've got to make something edgy or something that like really stands out, that like gets buzz and has viral content. Whereas like with True Justice, I think because you were talking about that, they were maybe had the idea in mind that they wanted to make this as a series that also could be turned into movies that could be sold abroad. They created something very different from what was popular at that time, for TV.
And also, I mean, at that time, we're still seeing it today. Everything is so serialized.
Yes.
Like if you have to watch episode one to know what's happening in episode two, you have to, and then and like you said, like the Netflix shows, it's like you're watching a 13-hour movie as opposed to 13-hour episode. So, uh, it's it's one of those things that's kind of refreshing to watch just two episodes that don't really hinge on the other's existence too much. And it's disposable, bite-sized entertainment. It's like, when you watch Magnum PI back in the day, not every case was this elaborate thing that led all the way up to, the top. It was just a one and done. There might have been like a two-part episode, or like a Rockford Files where somebody put away like comes back in the later episode, but it wasn't like, you absolutely had to know who all the players were and who wronged this guy and why he was after it. So it's just refreshing to have something that's just an hour and a half long and that's it.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because I mean, you think of like mentioned the Rockford Files. It's like, oh, we're bringing back Isaac Hayes and he's calling him Rockfish. It's like, yes, if you'd seen all the previous episodes, like, oh, Isaac Hayes is a reoccurring character, or like Louis Gossett Jr. was a reoccurring character, but you didn't have to know that, right? Like, to get him calling Jim Rockford Rockfish, right? Like, you didn't need to know all the episodes before to get why he was calling him Rockfish. It was just like, he's calling him Rockfish. And I think that's one of the things people are saying is one of the potential issues with the Marvels right now, right? That like, it's not just that you needed to watch Captain Marvel to get what's going on, but then you got to watch these other mini series that are like however many episodes to know who the characters are. And I think there is that kind of that thing now where it's like, it's almost like they've catered too much to the bingers and not enough to the casual viewer. And it's going to be interesting to see, like, if Marvel starts, I've heard that they're going to maybe go in a different direction from this, because maybe they're seeing like, okay, we had a pretty cool idea with the Marvels that we could have done something really cool with, but people feel like they're too bogged down and they can't just say, oh, I watched Captain Marvel, so now, I like Brie Larson and Captain Marvel, so I'll just watch this one. Now it's like, oh, did you watch those other mini series too? Like you said, with True Justice, there isn't any of that. There's not like, other Seagal movies that I needed to watch to understand what I'm watching here.
Well, I mean, with the Marvels, like I had heard so much, negative stuff about it. Like, so first I wasn't gonna go see it, but then our theater has a $6 Tuesday night, so
nice.
I was like, well, for $6, I'll go see it. And I watched the WandaVision, and I didn't watch Miss Marvel, but I had seen Captain Marvel, and it was fine. It like you don't there wasn't anything I felt like I missed. Like there wasn't a in all honesty, I enjoyed it. I mean, there was it felt almost like a Thor sequel. There's a lot of kind of they're like they go to a planet where the language is almost like is song. So like when they have a conversation, it's this big Bollywood musical.
Right.
And I'm like, well, wait, okay, that's kind of funny. That's different. I never seen that before. So I think those criticisms were kind of thrown at the movie before it was released.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's like a scene that's almost like Trouble with the Tribbles, but with Goose the cat. There's like 100 like hungry cats that are eating people, and it's like, okay, and it's set to memory from Cats, and it's like one of the greatest needle drops I've seen in a long time. I'm like I don't understand why anybody had their knives out for that. Just maybe because there's women and women of color behind the camera. It feels like that felt like that was the only reason why people were attacking that movie. And I went into not expecting anything, and not like, is it a great movie? No, but it's enjoyable. So like I always go into things like I don't go into something saying, oh, I hope this is bad, so I burn it on my blog. I'm like, I'd rather say, oh, Babysitter Massacre 4 stars than so 1962 Halloween Massacre half star. I don't want to write that review, but I have to because it hurt me, and now I have to hurt back.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that intrigued me about, there's two things that intrigued me about the Marvels, because I haven't seen it yet, but there's two things that did intrigue me. One is Captain Marvel is one of my favorites of the MCU movies, so that was one reason why I was interested. And the other thing is that it's only an hour and 45 minutes long, which to me is just like a really great. I think for a movie that's in the theater, hour 45 is a good sweet. I mean, if you can get it in under 80, that's always better for me. But I can't expect a 79-minute movie that's in the theater. So hour 45 is good. The problem was when I went and saw Fast X and Expendables 4, or however you say that, Expendables, or I don't,
Expendables.
right, exactly, Expendables. When I saw those, I saw trailers for it, and I was like, I don't know what's going on in this movie. Like, it just felt like it was like too much. And so like it would be nice, like maybe if they explained the movie the way you explained it to me, right? Like, here's some of this stuff in this movie, and maybe they were afraid of like the reveal, right? Like that if they do like the cat Trouble with Tribbles thing, they want it to be like a surprise thing. But for me, it's like if I had known it had these offbeat quirks to it, I'd be more likely to watch it because the story just seemed like it didn't make any sense to me when I was watching the trailers. And granted, maybe I'm at the point when I'm like halfway through my popcorn and I still know I've got like a whole movie left to watch because I've gone through so many trailers that maybe I just wanted to get the trailers over with. And so maybe that was the other part of it.
Well, I mean, it has a decent enough hook. Like every time they use their powers, they switch places, and it almost becomes like a mixing a tag team wrestling match with a teleporter. So then they have to figure out how to use their powers in a way where like and there's like even a training montage of them working on how to figure it. Does it all work? No, the villain's kind of weak. Some of the I wish some of the I wouldn't say I was lost, but like some of the other characters kind of get the short shrift.
Yeah.
But it was a solid B minus. Like I was entertained. Was it like kind of like it's if you go in expecting them all to be kind of like Endgame, you're going to be disappointed. So this was a light breezy. It's just kind of it felt more like a lark than like the definitive piece that brings all the Marvel movies together. And I think that's part of the reason why so many movies, like people are tired of these movies because it's like a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
It's like, oh, you think this is really good? Wait till you see the next one. That one is when we're gonna have all the guys in it, but we'll just give you one guy now.
Right.
So you know what I mean? And there's a little bit of that at the end. I won't spoil it because but it's a cool little Easter egg at the end. I'm like, oh, well, now I want to watch the next one. So it does work, but at some point, when does the bubble burst?
Yeah. No, you make a really great point with all of that because it's like, man, it's like it's like with the comic books, growing up with reading comic books, right? It was like each comic book was its own thing. Every once in a while they'd have crossovers, but it was like if Spider-Man was in an issue of Daredevil, it didn't affect what was going on in his 3 or 4 books that he had, that were also still happening. Or like even those 4 books themselves were completely, separate, right? They were separate stories that were going on, whether it was Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man or, Amazing Spider-Man with Eric Larson, and this idea that everything has to be connected. But it's like I think because we grew up with all the Marvel movies completely separate entities, right? It was like a big deal that Daredevil was in an Incredible Hulk movie, but for the most part, right, it was like if you're watching Spider-Man, you don't even get villains, right? You just get the actor like crawling up the wall in the 70s movie. So it was like when they started connecting them, it was such a great idea. But now it's like they're so connected that like you said, like I'm afraid to go see a movie because I don't know what's going on. And so I kind of wish that they would sell it better, like kind of the way you're selling this, where it's like, yeah, I didn't watch the Ms. Marvel, but I still enjoyed the movie. Like selling it as like you don't have to go through Disney Plus and watch all these movies. If you do, that's great, but you don't have to just enjoy this movie. If they get back to like a kind of a maybe happy medium where all the characters can be in each other's movies, but they don't have to always be connected, or like you said, like the Ponzi scheme where it's like you do one and you got to do the next movie, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I think the nerds ran George Lucas out of town.
Yeah.
Because of but you got to look back and say George was right because he knew what he was doing. You release 3 movies, maybe like a TV show or 2. Then you let the brand settle for 10 years. and then you come back, you bring it back, everybody's excited again. Then, release maybe a TV show or two, and then let the brand settle. Then you bring it back. And if George was still running the ship, I think we would have seen no Star Wars at the moment.
Yeah.
And it would build up a demand, for it. Now it's like everywhere you look at Star Wars, everywhere you look is Marvel. Instead of maybe once every 3 years getting a movie, you're getting 3 movies and 3 TV shows in 6 months, and it's just overkill.
Yeah, and then there's the other piece of sort of how Disney Plus cannibalizes their audience a little bit, because one of the things for me is that like I think the Marvels is I'm sort of softening on it. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't want to watch it, but I was like, do I want to watch it in the theater, or can I just wait until it's going to be on Disney Plus? That's kind of the calculus that I sometimes do with these movies. And a lot of times the impetus to get me to see it in the theaters, do I want to do a podcast or a blog episode on it? That's what's going to make me do it sooner, watch it sooner. But that's the other piece of it too, is it's like, okay, one, like you said, like there's so much, like you're getting so much content from Marvel and Star Wars, and it's like they're flooding the market with it. But then two, it's like, unless there's a really big reason to see it in the theater, right? A lot of people have really nice home, I don't really have a great home entertainment center, but I do like the fact that like I could watch the Marvels when it's on Disney Plus at midnight. It's not really safe in Philadelphia to go to a movie at midnight. It's not the best idea, but I can, after work, after I've done, going to sleep, just throw on a movie and watch it that way. And I think that's the other piece of it, right? Is that they've really got to make some, I think with a movie like the Marvels, like, is there a way to kind of have like a kind of a, I don't know, like a just go see it in the theater kind of thing, but it's not like it has to be an event, right? Like they don't have to make it an event to get you to see the movie, but just say, hey, like in your case, a $6 Tuesday movie is like a fantastic way to see a movie. I don't really have that option, but I think that idea that like everything has got to be an event, everything's got to be like you've got everything's got to have a big opening weekend, all of that kind of thing, where sometimes a movie is just like you said, it's just a B- fun theater watch. And unfortunately, it's like the Marvels can't be that for whatever, because of the budget and what Disney has hinged on it. It can't just be a nice B- that you watch at the theater.
Yeah, and like I said, it's kind of like the movie, like something like, I'm not saying it's as good as this, but like it's something like A Last Starfighter, where it's enjoyable. Is it Star Wars? No. Is it like the end all be all? No. But it's like a rainy afternoon. If it's on, you're on a TV, you're gonna watch it. And it's doesn't take itself seriously. That was like another thing that like like all these women are scowling in the poster. I'm like,
Right.
well, what? Do you want Batman to smile? I mean, it was like it was like no, like, and it was just I think the Marvels just kind of came around at the wrong time when everybody was kind of looking for a finger to point at and say, "Oh, this is the one that broke the camel's back." When it and honestly, I mean, it's better than the Eternals, or like something like that, where it was just kind of had these aspirations to be better than the genre, and it just kind of failed miserably. Whereas it knew what it was. It's a corny space opera, and there's something to be said for having a corny space opera.
Yeah, I mean, Thor Ragnarok, which there is things about Thor Ragnarok that I didn't like. I think from a story standpoint, it kind of followed the same like Marvel run of the mill story, but same idea, right? It's a space opera, and it's kind of like, it's kind of fun, and almost in that like 70s Italian Star Wars ripoff kind of way, almost.
Yeah, I mean that's the perfect way to put that. And I think uh, part of that too, it's having a filmmaker like Taika Waititi, who's gonna make a Taika Waititi film in the
Right.
Marvel universe.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Nia DaCosta is quite there, but she did put a stamp on it that made it feel different enough from Captain Marvel, but because at first I thought, I thought, oh well, now there's like three Captain Marvel. It was almost like a Fantastic Four. Like everything has to be a team now, like
Right.
Avengers. But it's really not like that at all. It's like almost can't really say it's low stakes, but it's lower than normal stakes. And I think if anything is like less than like the end of the galaxy as we know it, like the nerds get upset. It's like,
Right.
no, that I mean, how many episodes or how many issues of Spider-Man like just revolves around him getting Aunt May her meds on time so she doesn't
Right. Right.
it's like little like I think they forget that DC is more about the end all be all Superman fighting forces from space or Green Lantern, whereas Marvel really is like the I'm not saying lower tier, but I'm just like the stakes aren't that high unless you're in like a Secret Wars or something like that.
Yeah, because that was the thing, right? That's the thing is that you've got, Secret Wars, Acts of Vengeance, and obviously Infinity War, right? That was like the one in the 90s I mean, for me, the thing that I didn't like about the Infinity War movies is they didn't have Silver Surfer because of, whatever rights issues or whatever. It's like, how can you make these movies without Silver Surfer? He's such a big part of the comic books. But, you make a good point too with Marvel where it was like for example like Daredevil, when Daredevil would have big story arcs, they were grounded, kind of there wasn't a lot of mysticism, or there wasn't like this sort of larger than life, like you said, the galaxy's about to explode kind of thing. It was, no, he's fighting Kingpin, and he's got to figure out how he's going to get around that, or there were those kind of grittier stories that I think the TV show captured it a bit. But again, the TV show had that Netflix problem where it was like a 13-hour movie that, as opposed to like, more episodic.
Yeah, and I think too, like even the more fantastical, uh, like even like Silver Surfer, Fantastic Four, it was kind of I wouldn't say like Star Trek, but it was more like exploratory. It was more kind of whimsical than like doom and gloom, like a lot of like even like Crisis on Infinite Earths, or like like very uh like again, I don't want to say low stakes, but
Yeah.
compared to like not everything has to be a 12 issue crossover event, and sometimes just the one off the rack, you just want to read one and be done, and
Yeah.
just that's it.
Yeah, and the other point, about the Marvels, and sort of like the sort of the Schadenfreude with people, like you said, pointing fingers at it. I mean, this whole year has not really been great for blockbusters, right? I mean, we start with The Flash did poorly. Fast X didn't do what they wanted it to do, right? It compared to the previous installments in the Fast and Furious. Because if you look at Fast 9, yes, it only did like 700 million, but that was big because it was a post-COVID year, so it was still kind of a bigger number. But Flash did bad. The Mission Impossible movie didn't do as well. So it's like, and of course that Indiana Jones movie was like huge, like a huge flop for Disney, and which I contend the biggest reason why that Indiana Jones movie was such a flop was that they own the rights to the Predator. It should have been Indiana Jones versus the Predator. That's what the movie should have been. So that's it's their own fault for that. Somebody else joked online about how the fact that Disney owning the Predator, they also own the rights to the Ewoks. So Ewoks versus the Predator is a movie that we need, as well. So, um, but so it's like the Marvels, which is one of many blockbusters that hasn't performed the way that people think it should, and everybody's trying to do these sort of like these postmortems on it. But I think it's exactly like what you said. Is just everybody's fatigued with these. It's like all of these blockbusters are coming. I think the Transformers movie is another one that didn't do as well. It's like all of these big franchises are just like, no, you got to see this movie, you got to see this one, and sometimes you just need something, like you said, it's just like a $6. I mean, one thing about Expendables or whatever it's called is that one thing I can say about it is I didn't think it necessarily needed to be in the theater, but it was a very simple, like, hour and 45 minute that just kind of, I went there, ate my popcorn, and watched it, and in that sense it kind of did the trick.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I enjoy it. That was another one where the word of mouth was toxic on it from the get go,
Yeah.
and uh, I saw it again, $6 Tuesday, and I was like, I got every penny worth out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, is it a step below the other ones? Yes, but I mean, when you're talking about Stallone Part Fours, you got Rambo, you got Rocky Four. I mean, it's some pretty big shoes to fill when it comes to Part Four Stallone movies. So I'm not expecting a Rocky Four every time out of the gate, but it did the trick. I mean, and he's a guy that, and Statham too. I mean, when you look back, I mean, with like Charles Bronson or whatever, when they're finally gone, and they've left us this whole wealth of movies. And when I watch a Charles Bronson movie, like if I watch Kinjite or I watch Messenger of Death, it's a Charles Bronson movie.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and I'm glad to have it, even if it might not be as good as they all can't be Death Wish 3, and it's foolish to think that they should all be Death Wish 3. And going back to the Marvel cinematic universe in general, they all can't be Death Wish 3. You got to have a couple of Death Wish 4s in there to get you to Death Wish 5.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I think the thing with the Expendables movie for me was that, like, is this the movie I needed to wait 10 years for? And so there's that part of it. But you're right. Like, it's just like sometimes you just need a movie, right? Sometimes it's just, and not every, like you said, not every movie needs to be A plus. Not every movie needs to hit it out of the park. And I think the industry is always looking for that. Like, well, why did Barbie do so well, but Fast X didn't? Or why did Barbie do so well, but the Indiana Jones movie didn't? It's like we've got to break it down and figure out what it is. And it's like, oh well, the Marvels didn't do well because, like you said, fanboy guys were not a fan of it, and that's why they didn't. Or Gen Z didn't come out to see the Marvels, and now it's a huge problem for Disney that Gen Z doesn't like the Marvels movie. It's like they've got to do these post-mortems on it, where sometimes it's just like, yeah, maybe it's just a good movie, but it's not like a $1 billion earner. And that's the problem, I guess, with the industry right now, is that you can't just have a good movie, right? It's got to be a $1 billion earner for it to be considered successful.
Well, and that goes back to budgets. I mean, even when they were, the 80s, like the king of, like, all the big blockbuster movies, like Steven Spielberg, he didn't need a huge budget every time out. I think, Raiders was maybe what, like 12 million at like a time when that today would maybe be less than 100. I don't know. But he would, all the movies would be, 200, $300 million. And I mean, not when you get to like Jurassic Park, when you're pushing the limits of the technology, yes, that was a big budget. But uh, I know Jaws went way over budget, but at the time, for the return on the investment was insane. So I think too, it's almost like, I don't know if bragging rights is the right term, but it's like they always say bigger is better. Well, like it's okay to break your budget records when you're pushing out something like Spider-Man, No Way Home, or some, or Avengers, and because they flaunt it, like, oh, that was a $300 million film, and we made back $2 billion. But then, like you said, like I think Marvel's made like $47 million. Like, oh, that's a $215 million write-off. And it's just like, not everything has to be measured in box office. The real measure is going to be, like I said, 10 years from now, rainy Sunday, and you turn it on, and Marvel's is on,
Right.
and it gets you through your Sunday. That's when you're going to see where its place in cinema. Because I mean, think about how many movies you just caught randomly on TV, and then you wound up loving.
Right.
You weren't there the first day. I think there are movies that I watch religiously. I wasn't even born to see them in the theater, so it makes no sense if it was a box office hit or not. So if it's a $6 in the theater, I got every penny's worth. Or if you see it down the road, and it just 105 minutes, you're not thinking about your problems. I mean, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Maybe that's a good place for us to sort of wrap it up on. But actually, before we wrap up, anything else on True Justice? I know we got on a good tangent there, which was good there. But just in case there was anything that we didn't talk about on True Justice that you wanted to mention.
Well, I mean, like I said, just to wrap things up, like if you're a Seagal fan like you, and you haven't taken the plunge, it's like I think the comparison point would be Chuck Norris with Texas Walker Texas Ranger. It's not that caliber, but it gives you that kind of quick fix of Seagal for 45 minutes or 90 minutes if you watch the full movie. So it's easier to just kind of pick up and go, and it's not heavily serialized. So you can just watch one here, one there. And I think for either the casual Seagal fan or diehards like us, it gives you what you're expecting.
Yeah, I think that's a great place a great point to make. I think it's a great way to sum it up, because I think, especially now that these are on Tubi, and if you're somebody who has, kind of exhausted the Seagal, you all the films, this is a really great place to go next. And it is fun. And like you said, it's not serialized, so you can kind of pop into that, sort of think about like the river. You can kind of pop into the river at any point along the bank and get the enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, like I say, he uses his own voice. I mean, that's something. That's a box that you don't have to check off. He did all his own dubbing.
Yeah.
So, I'm always like a glass half empty kind of guy. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a perfect point to make as well. You're actually hearing Seagal, whether he's doing his different accents, you still get to hear him, which is fantastic.
He does multiple accents. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
people that see as many of these things as we have, like when you hear that, you're just like silently like fist pumping. Or okay,
Right,
yes,
exactly. Yes,
it's at least a 2-star right there if he's doing
exactly.
his own stunts. Maybe not, but like his own dialogue, that's something.
That's right. Two, yeah, as Meatloaf said, right? 2 out of 3. I guess 1 out of 2, right? Eight bad. Exactly. Sure. Excellent. Well, Mitch, anything that you wanted to plug while we wrap up?
Well, everybody can always find me, the Video Vacuum, at Blogspot, and I'm on Twitter, Video Vacuum, and I'm working on I've been working on this book, but I swear it's going to be done by Christmas. It's going to be called The Kung Fu Companion, the Chopsaki Movie Guide, and actually all the reviews for the True Justice movie can be found in that book. And I'm on my last pass of proofreading, and I got about 40 pages left. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it could be coming in your stockings anytime.
Excellent. That's exciting news, and yeah, we'll kind of keep it. Of course, the moment it comes out, I'll also kind of signal boost it on social media so people able to see that. And I think yeah, I mean, people should check out Mitch's other books. In the description for this podcast, I'm going to have the link to your author page, or to your books on Amazon, so people can go. But if you're looking up Mitch online, it's or on Amazon, it's Mitch Lovell, and Lovell is spelled Lovell. So 2 L's on the end. So but definitely, I think, Bloody Book of Horror, I think, again, a lot of people out there are huge horror fans that listen to this podcast. Great book. It's a great addition to your horror collector. And then, of course, the Unexpendables guide to the different people that were acting in the Expendables films. I think that's another great book that for action fans out there, you should always add that to your collection.
I know I might have to expand it for the Expendables, so
Exactly.
put some Tony Jaa and Iko Uwais movies in there. I don't know if I'll do a chapter on Megan Fox though, but that remains to be seen.
Right, exactly. Right, watch this space. But yeah, I learned recently with my novels, because 2 of my novels I printed on white paper instead of cream paper, and I realized like they should be. It was like cream is better for like fiction. That you can just re-release it as a new edition, so you can always have like the updated edition with those additional ones in there.
Like you'd be like Albert Pion with all the director's cuts.
Right, exactly. Right. Have one like this bad business where Jim Wynorski comes and finishes your book for you.
Well, he did the introduction for my first one, so there we go. Maybe that'll be good symmetry there.
Exactly. That'd be perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you again, Mitch. This was a really great conversation, and yeah, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.